Welcome to another episode of the Hunt Suburbia podcast. Today I'm joined by Derrick Dixon from Whitetail Research. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Pat.
Absolutely. Derrick's just telling me that he's actually likes to bring the drone up and get some fawn births on camera. Derrick actually spends so much time following deer around that one doe reportedly tried to charge you child support. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I hope that doesn't happen because that bill could rack up pretty quick.
In some ways, getting to witness these fawn bursts, do you kind of feel like a father figure to these deer?
Yeah, I don't actually get the opportunity to witness the fawn birth as frequently as you might think. It's kind of a rare phenomenon to record live in the field. I've seen, you feel like whenever the mama doe goes out and she's about to start having a baby, and then you kind of nighttime settles in, and I don't fly and spotlight them because I don't want to disturb them. And then you come back in the morning and it's like, well, dang it, now you have your fawn. So, and really the biggest thing that I get out of researching fawns is just keeping track of the fawn themselves and kind of what they're up to, where they're choosing to bed and kind of being shoved to by their mom. And then also if there is any introduction of a predator into that equation, and how they react based off of that. And honestly, very seldom have I recorded anything too wild off of that topic, and that's why I haven't posted a lot from it. So I've documented a lot of things, just basic level data, but I really haven't had a massive pull through in terms of oh wow, yeah, this. So that's why I haven't made a video topic on fawns yet. It's just it seems like a pretty basic level thing to be researching, but at the same time, I think that maybe someday I'll record an event where it's like, oh, like it's something that's actually really fascinating, and then I can bring that to light a little bit more. But at the moment, pretty much fawn births and things like that as to what's taking place. I think that maybe they happen a little bit earlier than some states might say. Like I recorded one birth this year in like early April, and that's not common for this area. If you just type it into Google, it's going to say May, June. But for the most part, they're all going to be happening like right now into June. It's just when they'll, for my area at least, southern Missouri, and it's just that's exactly what takes place. Is 90% of them all are birthed right now. Some of them die, whether it's to ticks or predator gets them, and I don't actually see it. It's pretty basic stuff in the end.
Yeah. Well, for anybody that's been living under a rock, I'm just going to give a quick background on you, and then we'll get into it, obviously, on your end, too. But Derrick Dixon, he started the Whitetail Research YouTube channel, putting together some incredible content, coming at Whitetail Research from an angle that we haven't really seen before, and I think you're really blazing a path there. A lot of research gets done inside high fences and at universities and stuff, and maybe they're more well equipped. Maybe they know the scientific method more than you do. But you're putting together some really compelling videos that kind of took YouTube by storm. I don't know, what was it, about a year ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Or a little bit more. I love the videos. I think what you're doing is awesome. Eric's going to be coming out to Huntstock in Midwest with a booth, and to kind of talk about more about what he does later on in the podcast. We'll talk a little bit more about Huntstock, but let's I wanted to start out with one opening question that outside of the hunting space, what is something that people would be surprised to learn about Derrick Dixon?
Yeah, probably. Oh man, I mean, I'm obsessed with a lot of hobbies, so I think in a lot of past podcasts, I've mentioned that I am obsessed with photography. That was one of the reasons that I was able to come out of the gate so hot with my YouTube channel and look at least semi like I had it together a little bit, was because I was already pre-exposed to being obsessed with cameras. So, I like photography, wildlife photography, landscape photography, nature photography, underwater photography, you name it. I'm fascinated with all those things. I'm into fly fishing. That's kind of like I love fly fishing. I do that very frequently, whether it's going out for rainbow trout, brown trout. My favorite thing is smallmouth. That's
Me too. I love smallmouth, man.
Yeah, they're the coolest fish out there. You can't argue that. If you try to, you're just going to lose because they're really fascinating. Heck, I caught one yesterday he was 2 pounds, and I caught him in a small pool on the 11 point, and we were in a small pool, and there were kind of ripples on either side where it funneled down, and the water was about an inch deep on each opposing side. And after I'd caught him, he was I revived him for a second because I had him out of the water to take a picture. Then I put him back in, revived him, and as soon as I released him, he swam downstream to the rapids, which were, like I said, an inch water, maybe 30 yards, 30 yards in length, and he launched himself like a dolphin halfway down that stinking rapids. And
Yeah.
then he proceeded to flip himself until he made it into the next pool. And he was basically like, screw this. I am leaving this pool of water. I don't trust it anymore. I'm going to the next one. And that was pretty funny. But yeah, no, I love smallmouth fishing, and yeah, and old cars. I love old cars. Wrenching on them, mechanic type work. It's fascinating to me, and engines, things like that, I find to be fun.
Cool. Yeah, smallmouth are like I think pound for pound they're like the best fighting fish out there. I love how much they jump, like you mentioned. You know, they love jumping. And my favorite thing to do with smallmouth fishing is find like a secluded pond that doesn't have road access anywhere, and you might have to hike a mile and a half to get in there, and lugging a canoe up
Mm-hmm.
with a buddy into a secluded spot, and just not even knowing if there's fish in there, just exploring. And then sometimes you find these like magical spots that just hold smallmouth. We've got this one spot in New Hampshire, me and my buddy Scotland, that it's a really tough lug, uphill for a long ways to get in there. So it takes us an hour and 15 minutes sometimes, carrying all your gear up. But once you get there, man, we hammer smallmouth, and they're like, it seems like every fish you catch is 2.5 to 3 pounds. And then there's some 4 or 5 pounders in there. And it's just, it's amazing. I haven't got to do that in quite a few years, but
Yeah.
yeah, smallmouth are the best, man.
Yeah, no, they're definitely my favorite, especially with a fly rod. That just makes it even better. So
Yeah, I haven't gotten to fly fishing much myself, but my buddy Scotland loves it. All right, cool. So Hunt Suburbia is brought to you by Onyx Hunt. You can use code HS20 for 20% off of your membership. Derrick, I think you use Onyx quite a bit. What's like the most useful under the radar tool in Onyx that you use that people should be aware of?
yeah, well, first, don't use his code. Use my code. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. But no, I probably. I think me and Zach Fehrenbaugh have talked about this one a lot, but is the ability to locate funnels. That's probably just whenever you're bored, sitting around in an office, just doing nothing, hanging out, whatever, is hopping on Onyx, pulling up your property, whether it's private, public, doesn't matter, and flipping on the LiDAR tab, going to Terrain X, all those features to locate steep terrain where you might not have thought there was steep terrain in that location, and then just marking those areas. First, you go and you find the areas that are 100% impassable. Like, without a doubt, this spot you cannot. LiDAR does not lie on it, or Terrain X is not lying as well. Like, this spot is impassable. You mark those, and then anything that's potentially impassable, go ahead and mark those as well. And then whenever you're in field, go ahead and take your peepers and look over there and see if it's actually impassable, and do some boots on the ground scouting. If it is, go ahead and mark that on your Onyx as well, and just continue to do that over time. And it's not going to happen in a week, while you're sitting around doing nothing. But after a few years of you doing this and marking off impassable terrain, and there's this ridiculous, white oak that fell right here and a root wad, and they can jump it, but I'm going to go ahead and mark that spot, and little things like that, continuing to add them to your repertoire. And some terrain where it's flatter, you might only get the opportunity to go in and mark kind of in your riparian areas where there's big banks, kind of shelves in a bend or something where, they can't walk up that and walk up and down it. They have to walk around it and things like that. Go ahead and mark it. And the more of those that you can add to your toolbox, the better you're going to be in terms of being able to develop a plan. Because then as you start to piece together, okay, that, per time of season, if it's early season, these oak trees are dropping acorns first, etc., you can kind of mark that out. And, well, I know for a fact that deer generally like to bed kind of over in this area, and this is the wind that I have for today, and these are the areas they can't travel, and I'm going to set up here. Yep. It enables you to be such a better hunter in the end if you can identify these locations where they cannot travel, in my opinion. Yeah,
I used the LiDAR feature a lot this last year when they introduced that turning on that layer. it helped out tremendously, especially the kind of hunting that I like to do where I've got a couple of my go-to spots, but I'm always looking for new spots and, looking for another place to go wing it for a day. And the night before I'm thinking, all right, where am I going to go sit in this new patch of woods? Like that LiDAR feature is probably the first thing that I'm looking at there. And yeah, like you said, you'll see a steep drop off somewhere. You'll see a cliff on this side, maybe just a little bit of flat spot going through
Hmm.
the middle. And you're like, well, that's definitely a place where the deer are going to be moving if they're going from here to here. And then if you see, all right, this looks like swampy up here, could be nice bedding. Down over here, we've got some acorn producing trees. Once you start to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, that LiDAR feature can show you terrain funnels that you're not going to see if you didn't have that
Hmm.
on.
Yeah.
One thing with Onyx that I wish, the one thing I wish would be improved a little bit is the topo maps. The topo maps, I like the old school maps from like the 50s that are, maybe 10 feet. They got 10-foot maps
Hmm.
because we don't have, I kind of feel like Onyx was started for Western style hunting where there's so much elevation change that the the distance between the lines
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the topo, it's fine the way that it's set up. But for like Eastern hunters or for more flat stuff, it's really hard to see those terrain features. But if you flip on that LiDAR, it does the job for
Yeah,
sure.
no, I agree with that. And there's another feature that I haven't even messaged the people at on it, but there's a feature that I want improved, and I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's one of those tabs that there's like 11 tabs that you can just flip on and off. Whether it's NWTF duck something oriented, a tab that you can flip on and off. But this one, it's like slope angle, slope aspect. I don't remember, but it's essentially that slider bar that you have in Terrain X where you slide back and forth. But this one, whenever you flip it on, it colors your map, makes it look kind of ridiculous. There's greens and reds and yellows and things. And there's a slider bar in the top right. Well, it's not a slider, but there's a bar in the top right that you can look at that'll reference the pitch of the angle of the terrain that you're looking at. And oftentimes, the color that you're looking at, especially in my area, it stops around 42 degrees, whatever color that is. And you can look at that, and it's just a super quick reference to be able to see, like, oh, okay, versus going into LiDAR versus going into Terrain X. This is a really quick way of doing it, and you can mark right over the top of it. But what I'm hoping gets brought to it someday is a slider bar up there, so that way you can slide and remove the colors from like 0 degrees to 30 degrees. And I just want to keep the colors for 30 plus degrees because that would eliminate a lot of work in terms of going in
Yeah,
and marking it up yourself. But anyways, we'll get that. That'll definitely get added someday, I'm sure.
nice. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's get into a little bit of your origin story. What was it that made you obsessed with understanding white-tailed deer behavior at the level that you are obsessed with it? What was it that made you want to do that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I've always just been inherently interested in whitetail deer, like a lot of people have. I mean, if you spend enough time sitting in the woods with a bow and kind of watching a mature buck out of range, and you start asking questions as to why he was doing what he was doing when he was doing it, and you mix that relationship of a lot of time in the woods with a bow with kind of fishing. A popularized thing in the fishing world is that Garmin, whatever it's called, that the guys use for bass tournaments, going out and locating fish. I was doing a lot of pond hopping in the late 2015 to 2020 ish range. My brain, as I was fishing for just largemouth and pond, I was wondering to myself, man, it would be cool if you could just take this cloudy water and remove it, and I could just see exactly where the fish were at and what they were doing. Not so that way I can cast my lure right in front of their face and see if I can catch them. I'm just genuinely curious, what are they doing? And then that same mentality started spinning over towards whitetail deer, and it was like, is there a way you could do that for whitetail deer? Because with fish, you're kind of having to work with that murky water. Deer, there's leaves on the trees, but beyond that, like what can I do that is capable of it? So in 2019, I was looking for anything that could see these deer, and there was a thermal camera, and you could connect it to a DJI Inspire 2 or Inspire 1, and it was extremely expensive, way out of most people's budgets, including mine. Um, so I basically, the technology wasn't there, and it wasn't affordable enough for me to be able to hop into it yet. And then 2022, the DJI M30T came out, and I saw that technology and was like, oh, okay, now we can make this happen. Because that drone did everything I ever wanted it to do. It was still extremely expensive, like sell your truck expensive, but it was still like, it was within bounds a little bit more. And so I kind of made it a mission to buy that, and that's what I did. And then I started researching, and really, I mean, the catalyst of it though was just that, like I said in the beginning, that sitting in the woods watching mature bucks kind of cruise around you, and just thinking to yourself like, man, I wonder where you came from, I wonder where you're going, and I want to know what you're doing whenever you're bedding. I got just very fascinated with that animal, particularly the mature buck. And, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, whenever you brought it up, like I have been researching fawns, I research does, I research younger bucks, but really the mature buck, the kind of allure of a mature buck and his behaviors and what he's doing, that's by far the most fascinating thing to observe, because they're so individualistic in how they behave. And it's really fascinating.
Is there like one specific thing that you've observed in all the hours that you've been flying that made you think like, wow, we really don't know these animals as well as we think we do?
One specific thing. I mean, I feel like there's probably a lot of ways I could take that question, because I think that a lot of people, I would probably have a different answer of this like every hour of the day if you asked it to me. But the one that's coming to my mind right now is that I think a lot of people kind of overcomplicate things as it pertains to white-tailed deer, and they start, pinning the mentality of this mature buck being a ghost, and he never comes in front of you, and he kind of rules the roost and only pops up on your trail camera whenever you're not there, and things like that. And uh, the one thing to really truly understand is that he's always out there. Like there's
Yeah,
always a deer in the woods, and
yeah.
he didn't just magically leave it and vanish into the air. Like I had this one buck, and it was my favorite. Gosh, it's so cool. I probably need to make another video on him, but it was a mainframe 10. He was 4 years old. He I found one of his shed antlers and measured it and duplicated it, and then added an estimated 18-inch spread, and he would have scored 160 inches. And that's very uncommon for Southern Missouri. He was just he looked like 180-inch deer, but he wasn't. He just didn't have tine length, etc. He's just a beautiful, beautiful deer. Everybody naturally wanted to hunt him and see him and
Is that the
potentially
one
get
that
the
had
chance
a
to
pretty
kill him.
white rack?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was he was the one. I think the thumbnail for that image is just this ridiculous looking Big Ten with red
Yeah.
text, and it's a black image. So he was a beautiful deer, and but he was only maybe even 3 years old, but I think he was 4 years old. And with that, everybody wanted to hunt him, but nobody seen him in person. And there were some pictures of him kind of in velvet, and then there was a big span where there were no images of this deer, and nobody had a clue that this deer existed that entire time. But I'm sitting here watching him like every single day, and I know that he's there. But everybody else is kind of banking it off of their trail cameras, and not a lot of
Hmm.
pretty much no infield sightings. And it's like he's just, he's moved off the property, he's not there anymore, he's gone, he left, etc. And I mean, he is right there on the he is there, he's in everybody's kitchen, and nobody has a freaking clue. And then all of a sudden in December, I don't remember the exact dates, I'd have to go back and look at it, but at one point he popped back up on trail camera, and my phone just started lighting up, and everybody's like, did you see him? He's back, he's back, he's back, like go research him. And everyone's like freaking out that this deer is back on the property all of a sudden. And it's like, I've been researching this thing for 2 months, guys. And he has been in that area. I mean, he's everywhere, he is all over the place in that area, and nobody had a stinking clue all season long. And it was just because everyone was basing so much of their mentality off of that trail camera. And I think there's a time and place for it, but in this situation, it was definitely not panning for a lot of those guys that were wanting to hunt that deer.
So was he kind of staying on a property that they weren't allowed to hunt, or were they on the same property that you were observing him on?
Yeah, without revealing a lot. I mean, I could say his exact location. It wouldn't help anybody hunt him because of where he's located. It is pretty complicated to attempt to, but probably 60 to 75% of his time, well, I'd have to go back and actually calculate that out, but was spent on our property. The main research property that all these people that were messaging me were hunting on, and then
Hmm.
the other portion was spent on 2 to 3 other people's properties that are just kind of like 40-acre blocks, 50-acre blocks, or 60-acre blocks that are all connected off the side. And I'm sure he's left that area before. He's probably gone beyond it. He's probably crossed a road. He's gone to other locations, but most of his time was spent kind of in that core area. And I mean, honestly, it's one of the things I wanted to do was go and video him on in person on foot. And I was working out strategies. Mind you, I can see this deer. I watch him every single day. I document his beds. I document his movements. I know when he moves. I know kind of why he's moving and how he's adjusting, to his younger group of bucks that he's traveling with in the late season. I know every stupid thing about this deer. I watched him so much. And I'm trying to develop, and I'm also not a terrible hunter, by the way, and I'm trying to develop a plan. How can I get within 50 yards of this deer and take a picture of him in a video without disturbing him? That's kind of the big catalyst of it. Is I don't want to go in and mess it up and bump this deer out of his native natural setting of a habitat just because I'm trying to take a picture of him. So I want to go in and video him without disturbing this deer. And there wasn't really many. There was one day that I think I probably could have done it, but I was out of town, and where the wind was playing to my favor, and there was enough kind of little light rain cover to mask kind of your footsteps coming down this tree line that I was going to need to come in. And I was even going to have to ask for access onto multiple properties to be able to cross in on the backside to be able to access where he was coming out into. I mean, it was to be able to access it from my property though. Good luck. You're going to bump him every time. There was a 0% chance that you could get close to that deer from my property. You would not have been able to do it. The only way that you could have gotten close to him is if you sat on the fringes of him on my property and prayed that he actually circled and walked within that fringe. But nobody would have done that. If you would have gotten a trail cam picture of him where we were getting trail cam pictures of him, and then you moved in and you tried to hunt him on that specific location, bumped him. He's gone. He would have heard you, seen you, etc. I mean, you're screwed. So no, it was very fascinating to see. But the moral of the story, though, is just the fact that everybody was so reliant on the trail camera, and everybody, they had their preconceived notions and thoughts of the fact that this deer is such a magnum of a deer and a ghost and a phantom, and he's gone. He disappeared, and nobody's going to be able to kill him. And he was there the whole time. And there were definitely situations you could have been able to hunt him. Like I said, I had that one whenever I realized I was going to try to video him, but ultimately, yeah, no, it wasn't easy. It would have been extremely difficult. He had that location pretty dialed in. So
Now, like, so for every guy like you with a drone, who's got ethics, you're not, you weren't telling the guys that were hunting that deer, that he's on the property, and you're not trying to go out and kill him. But for every guy like you with a drone, there's probably 10 guys that if they had a drone and they were in that scenario would go out and try to kill that deer, which obviously is illegal or unethical. Do you have any fears about that, the rise in drone usage, and how that could affect the hunting populace, especially like the big mature bucks? You could find one very easily and be able to go in and try to set up and kill them. What do you have any fears about that, or any thoughts about how that could affect the future?
yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure it's already happening, right? There are guys out there that had the available funding just off the side back of their pocket, or they went and dug through their couch and found enough money to buy a drone. And they seen these guys on YouTube, whether it was me or Mike Yoder from Drone Deer Recovery, etc., flying a drone and looking at deer, and they immediately made that connection. It's like, oh wow, that could make it easier for me to go out and locate my target buck on my property that I see on trail camera and potentially get a shot at him. And I'm sure that people have realized that. I'm sure that they've done it. And as to what you do about that, tighter regulations, ban drones for certain portions of the season, and on a state by state basis. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that even if they were left unbanned, like let's just say every state, and there are already states that have banned them, by the ways, some
Yeah.
that probably should have, and they had the right reasons to. I think Texas was one right out the gate. Texas was like, no, you guys cannot. And but anyways, I think that even if a state left them completely open and legal to be flown by anybody, if caught poaching by utilization of a thermal drone, I think that the punishment for that needs to be exorbitantly high than many other things. Just make it to where, like, yeah, we're going to leave it legal because there are great use cases for thermal drones, whether it's drone deer recovery or thermal research like what I'm doing. And maybe that gets put into a controlled setting where, you have to do this X, Y, and Z to be able to go out and research deer. I don't know, or maybe be involved with the university. I don't know what the steps would be for that. But basically, if a state leaves it legal, to be able to just own and fly one during hunting season for whitetail deer, then I think that, if caught poaching utilizing one, then yeah, you should be punished. But at the same time, it's like, if caught poaching at all,
You
spotlighting,
should be
etc.,
punished.
you should
Yeah.
be punished at the same level. It's the same freaking thing. So, I mean, bad people are going to do bad things. I don't know where to. Yeah, the drone seems terrible because it's this new thing and it's this new piece of technology. But, um, the guy that's going to poach a deer with a thermal drone, he'd poach a 190-inch deer if he's seen him standing in a field with, and he had the opportunity to spotlight him. He's going to do the same thing. So it's that same group of people that just don't have enough care for the wildlife, in that setting, and they don't have the ethics. So
How much of you, like, so you've given up hunting to do this, to do your whitetail research channel, right? Like, do you envision that staying for forever? Like, you must be getting the itch to get back out there and hunt. Like, how are you juggling that in your mind?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I do a little doe management here or there, and that kind of helps a little bit. And then I do photography, so I'm able to go out and sit with the camera just in general. And this year, this last year, I did get out and go hunting. I didn't post it on my YouTube channel. I put it out on my Patreon, but I did go out, and it was like, I don't remember how many weeks into rifle season. During rifle season, I'd been there was a specific portion right up pretty close to our cabin where I don't research. It's not that fascinating of a location.
Yeah.
And there was a buck that well, actually, for a week I was gone. I was out of state. I was in Indiana and in a couple other areas around that, over in Iowa a little bit. And while I was gone in early November, we were just getting trail cam pictures. And you probably know, I don't put a lot of stock in trail cam pictures. Oftentimes, if it's like one or two a week, then it's kind of like, okay, like, good to know that he's alive, and that's about all that I take from it. But in this situation, I was getting a picture of this deer in the morning, in the evening, in the morning, in the evening, in the morning. I mean, for like 7 days straight or 8 days straight. It was nonstop. And on the eighth day or seventh day, I came back home, and I woke up that morning and I had a picture of him in the morning again. I was like, "Are you kidding me? You stinking!" And this deer, he was a banana buck on one side, just a big banana, and then he was a 4 point on the other side, and he's like
Yeah.
7 or 8 years old, a
I got
dinosaur of
one.
a deer.
I got one just like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and whether or not his genetics are going to play a role into the future herds, scientifically, what, I don't really care. But still, the number one thing that I do know takes place by him still existing on a property, and for land management purposes, is that he is taking up a slot for a mature buck. This deer he is kind of holding down a location 100%, and he's breeding does in that area versus allowing potentially a better buck or a younger buck that might have better genetics to kind of move in and live in that location. So I got kind of sick of seeing this deer on trail camera, and no one's interested in killing this deer. I mean, he scores 90 inches, I bet. I'd seen him, for that week, and I was like, I'm just gonna go kill this deer. So I went and I sat in a stand, I think on my second hunt, and I killed him. Um, yeah, he was a cool old deer though, just an ancient creature. He smelled bad too. Oh my gosh, he was raunchy. He was just
Yeah.
he was an old deer. But
Was his 4 point side just like a slob side?
yeah, no, it wasn't. He had a lot of mass. He had pretty good mass,
Yeah.
but I think that his G2 was like 6.5 inches, and his G4 was kind of a little knobbly, and it was like 4 inches. So yeah, I mean, but he was just a cool old buck, and his banana side may have had like a little, inch and a half point off the tip of it,
Yeah.
and he
Dude,
may have
that's
had an inch.
exactly the
Yeah,
same as this deer that I've been seeing
yeah.
for a few years. It's like, but if he had, but his one side that has 4 points is, he's probably got some 10 and 11 inch tines on that one.
Oh
And then
wow.
the other side, same thing. He's got like a tiny little split. And I wonder if he was ever, ever a full, 4x4, or if
Hmm.
he was just born that way. It kind of looks like he might have got injured, and then it just, that same side grows back the same every year. But if he had both sides, he'd be an absolute monster.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely common for them to get injured. This year, I don't think he ever would have been a monster, but he was definitely, he was probably 110 to 120-inch deer if he had both sides, and that's pretty common for this area. Around an average of 120-inch deer for a mature buck for this location is very, very average, and that's kind of what he would have fallen into. But just because he had that banana side, though, nobody had a care of interest for that deer, and he's showing up every day, and it's like, can somebody go hunt this deer? But I went, and he followed a doe out into the field, on the edge of the field, right next to me. And I mean, he wasn't 25 yards, and it was like, okay, well, you couldn't have made that easier for me. So, and he's just slobbing at his nose because he's so infatuated with that doe in front of him. So
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like the area of Missouri that you're in is very similar to, like in my head, being a northeastern guy, growing up hunting in Vermont, living in Massachusetts now. We feel like Missouri would have a bunch of massive bucks, but around here it's like the same thing, that your average mature buck is probably 120 inches. Like these ones behind me on the wall are 125 inches, and they're kind of that average, what that average mature buck gets to. But then every once in a while we get them in the 160s, 170s, like that big 10 pointer that you were following. So it sounds like we kind of have similar I don't know, deer genetics.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we almost always get every year like one, maybe two anomalies. And just for this general research area, which the research area, the core property is close to 1,000 acres, but I have access to a couple thousand over that. And within those bounds that I research with the drone, I almost always find one deer that is around 160 inches. But in the past, when running trail cameras and just hunting, myself, every once in a while, it would be like every 3 years, I feel like you'd find a deer that was over 160 inches, and it was just kind of like a mythical moment every single time. So yeah, no, it's a very similar type of property. But if you go north in Missouri, all of that changes. You go north of the Missouri River, then you're in a completely different ballgame. You're in agriculture, and those deer bigger.
Yeah, it's funny how rivers can be a divide for bucks. So I see that here too. The Connecticut River runs between Vermont and New Hampshire, and it's a really big river. And on the Vermont side, the deer are so much smaller than just on the other side over there. It's like that river. Once you get over there, it's got to be something in the minerals or the soil or something. Once you get over there, the deer are a lot bigger in New Hampshire.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt that.
So let's talk a little bit about the work that goes into this channel, and to what you're doing, because I don't think a lot of people realize, just content creation in general is so much work. But like, what does a normal research day look like for you?
Yeah, no, oftentimes it's hard to choose, what days you should be researching and what days you should be trying to edit a video, but especially whenever you get into deer season, that's probably the timeline that's the most important to that, idea to talk about. Is I'm researching every day at that point, right? So I'm always flying. I'm never not flying something, whether it's, I'm in a different state or I'm in my home state and I'm flying out at that core research property, or I'm relocating to different other, private properties within Southern Missouri. So that way I can mix it up off of my property. But I'm always going somewhere and flying, but I am also always packing my MacBook in my back pocket everywhere I go. Kind of whenever you're flying, then you can make it on a deer that's bedding, and then you can kind of pause and check out and maybe try to edit a little bit of a video for a portion, or maybe something is happening and it's not going to be an ideal situation to be sitting and watching, and whether it's just absolutely pouring rain or lightning or whatever, you kind of take those moments and try to edit whenever you can when out in the field. But oftentimes, I mean, across a full day, it's probably not common to get an hour of editing time whenever out in the field, because you're so focused on capturing data and flying the drone. So a lot of the video editing takes place at nighttime, and I mean, 80-hour plus weeks, very common. And that's just part of it. The videos don't make themselves, and oftentimes the videos require research. So you have to go out and do the research, and you have to capture data and information that's useful for a video. And then you have to take all of that and then create a script off of it, or just read off, off the top of your brain whenever you're making a video, record all of that, and then overlay video that makes sense and is able to kind of dilute some of the things that you're saying to make it digestible for the viewer. And because oftentimes a lot of my videos, and people have left comments about this, is that they have so much information in them that it's like it can be overwhelming, and you have to watch it 2, 3, 4 times before you can digest every bit of it. And I try to get better at that. I try to I've been trying to get better at motion graphics and things like that, to where everything can kind of connect a little bit better whenever I'm doing a math equation on the screen. But in the end, I mean, it just takes an exorbitant amount of time to be able to make one video that's a research oriented video, because
Yeah.
you have to do all the research, you have to capture all the video, you have to keep everything organized, by the ways, and then you have to make a valuable video topic off of that, and then record yourself speaking it all, go back and overlay all of the video, cut it up, do motion
Yeah.
graphics, and kick
Yep.
it out. And I'm the guy that does all of it. I don't have anybody hired for any of it. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you've had to sacrifice, as you started this channel. And I mean, I guess obviously sacrifice a lot of hunting time, but just free time in general, it sounds like you don't have any of it anymore, at least
yeah,
during
no,
deer season.
I have a little bit of free time that I cut out for myself pretty much every evening. So I work on a hyper tight schedule, oftentimes, especially outside of deer season. Deer season is lunacy. I don't sleep much. I'm always thinking of something, and I'm always trying to fly the drone. So whenever in deer season, then it's pretty crazy, especially whenever you have a wife, and now I have 3 kids. Um, but
Yeah.
outside of deer season, then I work on a really tight schedule. I work from like 7 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. and then I cut off, and I'll try to leave unless I'm trying to research something. Sometimes I will pull back out, the MacBook, and fly up a drone from somewhere and do a little bit of research on something, whether it's fawns or whatever. But for the most part, I have a pretty hard cutoff, and then I go back and I'll be with family, and we'll go
Yeah.
hit the town, or we'll go to a river and go swimming or go fishing or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah. That's super important. I'm very similar to you in that respect. Like, your deer season is like basically my right now until Huntstock starts. I'm super busy, so I'll just stay super focused in the office, get what I have to get done, and then as soon as I get home, phone is away, computer's away, and I'm just spending time with family. And then during actual deer season, it's I get my son on the bus, and then I go hunting when I can, and I spend as much time as I can during the day when I should be working. But that's my off season. That's when I take off to be able to get out and hunt. But I do it between the hours of 9 and 5 most of the time, so that I still can get home and spend time with family and do all the important things. Yeah, I think it's super important, because otherwise, a lot of people can get caught up into it too much, and then ruin their families. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's just not worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think you said, probably, it's fascinating that it's one of the most important things, but whenever you're getting home, is actually setting down your phone and just putting it down,
Yeah,
and
you have to.
turning the stinking thing off. I mean, I do the same thing whenever I enter my office, which my MacBook is connected to my phone. So if I get an important notification, I have it filtered out to where, like, specific people can come through and still in my messages, or specific applications can come through. But I pretty much turn everything to do not disturb. I don't even bring my phone in the office oftentimes, and you just zone out and you start doing your thing. And I think that, yeah, no, that's really important, because the phone is I mean, you could even spin that back towards hunting. A lot of guys, and don't tell me you've never done it, is have your phone on you and just kind of sit there and scroll for
Oh, I
45 minutes while out in the stand.
I
Yeah,
do that
no,
all the time. Yeah.
oh my gosh, the amount of things that people miss doing that, I'm sure, is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So have you ever become emotionally attached to like a deer that you followed? And then part two to that, does your wife get jealous about it?
Yeah, no, there's been two. There's been two deer that I was emotionally, you could say, emotionally attached to. One would be Winter, I called him. I made a video on him. He
Yep,
was
I
the
remember
first
him.
big deer that I'd ever researched, and I tracked him for a really long time. It was honestly, it was pretty depressing whenever I'd lost him, because I was trying to, I say lost him. As far as I know, I don't think he died, but I have no idea. But it was late January, and I was trying to get him dropping a shed antler, and that's kind of been these deer that I've become obsessed with. That's been my number one thing to try to do, is try to get them,
Yeah.
record them doing a shedding event. And so I was tracking him nonstop every single day, and then he just vanished on like January 26th, and I guess he turned into a ghost. I don't know, like, he left the area and just completely was debunked. I flew for another 2 weeks or so trying to find him, and I never found him again. And then this 10 that we'd already talked about, the big 10 that was a 4-year-old 160-inch deer. I tracked him at the same level that I was tracking Winter, actually more than I tracked Winter. He was I was trying to get a shedding event on him as well. and I failed once again. I was recording him nonstop, and then he vanished for 3 days or 4 days. I don't remember exactly the timeline on it, but he left just like Winter did. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like right at the time you're going to shed antlers, you stinking leave me again. And then all of a sudden one day he came back and he was missing one of his sides. I was like, oh, okay. So you probably dropped it in this area that I wasn't flying, or at least in that direction. So then I continued to watch him nonstop so I could get him shedding that opposing side that he was still hanging on to. And I tracked him for 7 days. I know that took a week. It took a week for him to shed that opposing side. And whenever he did, there was a winter storm that was moving in, just a massive snowstorm for our area. I think we got like 10 inches, which may sound like nothing to you guys up north, but for me, that's life changing for Southern Missouri. People, no, people, they don't know how to react to that. But it was snowing that morning. It was just starting, and I located him at like 6:15 a.m. or something, and he had shed that side already, and he was bleeding from the top of his pedestal. And it's like, are you kidding me? You already shed it. But then I thought to myself, in my brain, it's like, there's snow on the ground, and I know where you're bedding right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you're bleeding, so you probably dropped it pretty close. So I went out and followed his tracks out of his bed, and I found it immediately. So
That's cool. What's your hypothesis on if you had all the information in the world, and you were able to capture all the shedding events? When do you think they shed the most? Is it standing up out of their bed? Is it while they're feeding? One thing I actually captured on trail cameras one year was 3 bucks coming together in February. And you know how like in February they'll start, they're just sparring a little bit, and they're not like full blown rut fighting. Obviously, they're just playing around. And I saw 3 of them coming together and doing that, and dropped their head out of frame, and then one popped up without it. So they dropped during that. But what would be your hypothesis? What do you think they shed the most?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure that it depends on deer. It depends on environmental factors that are causing them to have their testosterone and everything lower, so that way they're actually going to enter into that shedding event. I would say, I don't know, that you saying getting up out of their bed is probably a likely story for a lot of deer that are going to be shedding their antlers. Because one thing that I noticed for sure is he was getting, before he'd shed it, he'd even shed his first side, he was getting very frustrated at that antler. He would,
Yeah.
and probably the most common time frame for them to actually drop is standing out of their bed, just because they stand up and they kind of get frustrated at it, and he'll scratch around the base of his antler, and then he would just shake his head left and right, just super hard for like 15, 20 seconds. And every time he did it, I would think to myself, well, here we go, he's going to drop him. And he wouldn't. And then after shaking his head, he would kind of go and make a rub on a tree, but he was really scratching. It seemed like he was rubbing those pedestals in the base of his antlers right up against the tree, because it was bothering him. It was itching him. Something he just didn't like. It's kind of like,
I think it's like they throw their balance off. It must be super awkward to have just one. You know what I mean?
In this case, he had both. So, and he was frustrated even with both of them on. So I think that it's even like if you get a big cut on your arm or your leg, and then it starts to scar over and it's really itchy in that spot, it's kind of a similar thing. It's causing them to be really itchy in that area, and he just wants it gone. Whatever it is, he's trying to get rid of it. And oftentimes I feel like it's going to be just that jumping over a fence, which causes them to rock their head really hard. Intentionally shaking their head, sparring potentially. I've recorded, you said you recorded one on trail camera. I've actually recorded one on trail camera where I had a camera down in a creek bottom, and there was a log that had fallen over, and I had a camera up on the log for bobcats and things like that were crossing it. But then I had one down below the log to see, just out of curiosity, what walks below this log in this little tight funnel area. And I had a young buck walk through, and he bumped I watched, literally, it was video. He bumped his antler on the log, and it knocked it off right there next to him. And I was like, oh, wow, he just shed it. So I went out and picked that up. But I think there's a myriad of things that can cause them to actually drop them. But in most cases, it's going to be something that causes their body to rock and shake. And whether that's them intentionally doing it or jumping a fence, sliding under a fence, things like that.
Yeah. One thing I always talk with my friend and partner in Huntstock, Pat Burns, we talk about after it rains or when it's raining. Have you observed this with your drone? During a rain or right after a rain, when they get up out of bed, they shake their body off like a dog. They do that shake, I think in scenarios like that, late like February, March, April, if right after a rain or something, when they stand up, I think that a lot of them shed after that, where they're doing that real hard shake to dry their fur off. And I think,
I
it's
wouldn't
just
doubt
at the
there.
point.
I wouldn't doubt there could be something to that. The only thing that I would counter on it is just the fact that I've seen them, whenever they get frustrated at their antlers, I've seen them shake just on their own without having any water on their body already. They just stand there, and I mean, there was one instance where he rammed. Who was in that video where he rammed that? I think I called him the banana buck, but another buck that had a banana antler. He rammed him in the butt with both of his antlers, and then after he did it, he stood there. I didn't leave the video in. But he stood there for 45 seconds and he just shook his head back, left, right, left, right, left, right, as hard as he could. So I think he was just getting super frustrated in that moment and trying to get rid of him. So, but yeah, no, there definitely could be something to that, adding to kind of the volatility of their shake that they're doing, which could cause a detachment. Yeah.
All right, cool. So how many hours do you think overall you've flown a drone?
How many have I flown the drone? Just
Yeah.
flown?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
flown.
Yeah. Well, I know that how many I've researched. Last year I researched a little over 2,000 hours. And then this last year, well, the first year was a little over 2,000. Then this last year was a little over 3,000. It was closer to 3,500.
Wow.
So, total hours on the drone though.
I think
Yeah.
I think the better question was how many have
How
you
many
been?
hours have I researched? Yeah, total hours on the drone's a lot more than that.
Wow,
Just
so
because I
30.
mean, if we're just asking about what kind of drone I'm flying, I've flown a lot of drones before that, and I've just kind of hankered around them. And I also practiced a lot with that drone before I ever started researching that season. There was a whole summer where I was just flying every single day before the first deer season that I researched. So yeah, but anyways, yeah, over 5,000 hours.
100 hours is 145 days. That's crazy. Like straight 24-hour days.
Yeah,
Divide that by 2, a 12-hour day, which is still a long ass day. That's pretty much a full year. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah. And
So and all
it could have been less than that. It could have been closer. I think it was closer to 3,000. But
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
that's still a lot. So in all of that time, what do you think the biggest myth is that hunters believe about mature bucks that you think you've been able to debunk in all of that time? Is there one myth?
Yeah, I mean there probably is one specific myth, but I'm trying to think. Thermals are a really big topic that I like to dive down. But really, probably the main one, and I go back to it a lot, but it is probably one of the main ones. It has to do with the fact that of deer bedding on the leeward side of a ridge and things like that, and just being able to pin it down to that simple methodology of the fact that you look at a property. And yeah, let's look at the leeward side of the ridge for a northwest wind, and they're all going to be on the opposing side of that in that case. And it's just not the case. Oftentimes, they're all over the map as it pertains to that. And there's definitely deer that are on the leeward side of the ridge. I mean, that doesn't mean that they're not. But in terms of are they all 100%? It's probably like a 30 percentile are on the leeward side of the ridge, and a lot of those other deer they're utilizing these terrain features that unless you were in there in person on the ground looking at something, you're not going to recognize that that they're actually on the leeward side of anything unless
Yeah.
you're in there in person looking at it.
All right, let's talk about like the daily buck movement a little bit. I know you've done some videos on that. How different is a buck's actual daily buck movement versus what most hunters imagine? Is there some little thing that you've picked up on?
Yeah, no, probably one would be, in my camera, in the morning time. I'm blanking. Sorry,
Why don't we narrow it?
Notification came up.
Let's narrow it into like the quote unquote October lull, right? When people think, oh, deer are going nocturnal. What have you learned about their buck move, their daily movements during that time?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because that definitely finites it down a little bit for me. Yeah, in the October lull, one of the biggest things that I see, especially for my area at least, and this could be area specific, but as you run into really high temperatures, kind of continuing into October, which could potentially play into that lull phase that's taking place and allow them to have more nighttime activity. But the number one thing that I've been seeing, especially in early October, and the reason I say that is because a lot of people in the early season once again, my season starts September 15th. So early season's kind of September 15th to maybe October 15th if you wanted to go that far. And most people only hunt in the evening time in that area. They're kind of waiting for that morning activity until later October, November, those peak rut time frames before they ever get out in the morning. But what I'm seeing, and whether it's human avoidance that's taking place or it's actually just more activity in the morning, is even in that kind of early October timeframe, whenever the lull starts to set in, is there's a tremendous amount of activity in the morning than in the evening. And whenever you kind of try to figure out why that is, if you look at the evening, oftentimes those last 15 minutes of light, that's like the peak movement activity. But oftentimes, in my area, it could be 85 to 90 degrees all day long, all the way up until that last 15 minutes of light, whenever everything starts to fall off, and then bam, there's deer activity. And if you spin around and you look at the morning, all morning long until 8:30 a.m., it was 60 degrees. So there's a tremendous amount of activity happening at 60-degree weather, and then it starts getting up into the 80s versus, kind of in that late evening time frame, they're waiting until that last 15 minutes of light. So I think that you kind of have to shift around with temperatures and start playing more of a temperature game during the October lull, looking for those time slots where temperatures are going to be dropping, even if it's where you have a day that it's just kind of exhaustively hot and then a rain moves in and that shower comes in and then it stops and shuts off at like 1 p.m., just after noon or 2 p.m., then I would be going out that evening because oftentimes it's going to be cooler, maybe a cold front moved in. And even if that cooler means like 5 degrees cooler, that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about like a 20-degree cold front moving in, just like a little shift in the weather, cloud cover, something to take that exhaustive heat away. And yeah, get out there and start watching them move because they'll definitely take advantage of it.
I'm glad you brought that up too about the mornings in early October, because that's kind of a myth or something that traditionally, you've heard over the years is, early season, you're going to have a lot better opportunity going in the evening, and some people only hunt evenings early season, but I've always loved the mornings. And I've had a lot of success in the mornings. And we just talked about this with Aaron Warbritt. And I think hunters are doing a disservice. Like, if you have time to hunt early in the season, if you can go out in the morning, go do it. Just don't be walking through food sources to get in there, but use, all the knowledge that you've accumulated and find a way to get in, where you're not walking through their primary food sources, and you're maybe sitting over one of those terrain features heading back towards where you think they're bedding. That early season is killer, man. In the morning, I absolutely love hunting it. So I think that, that's a myth somebody could take away from this is, don't be afraid to hunt the mornings. I think that's just kind of antiquated advice to hunt the evenings only. And maybe a lot of that's coming from people that are hunting, managed land or a private property or something where all of their stands are set up, basically on the food sources. That might be where that information is coming from.
Yeah. Well, another thing to add to it, and I mentioned it a little bit, but is that there could be some of this kind of deer recognizing human activity heightened in the evening time frame in the early season, and then they just generally start avoiding moving at that time frame a little bit more and start focusing that movement time where it's also cool in the evening versus that late evening, or in the morning versus the late evening. And yeah, maybe there is some human avoidance that's taking place, and maybe you can capitalize on it by everybody else hunting in the evening and you deciding I'm going to go sit in the morning. So
yeah. Well, on that topic, have you recorded any events where just by chance you happen to record, a human hunter or somebody walking a dog or something as you're recording a deer? And what have you learned about what those deer do when they notice a human's around?
Yeah. I've done vehicles. I've done people on foot. I've done e-bikes, and I've done myself on a UTV and ATV and things like that. And in settings where it's kind of normal, that thing is the normal. There's people that, every couple weeks they come out with a UTV and drive around on it, or grandpa drives around on a truck on this property all the time, or it's a farm and they ride tractors and UTVs, etc., around all the time, and there's just general human activity. Then oftentimes the deer won't even budge. They'll stay right where they are as long as the habitat allows for it. Now, if it's does bedded out on the edge of a field and it's, it just got cut for hay or something and they could see you from 300 yards away, then if you move in their direction, they're probably going to get up and move. But in a setting where they're actually secluded, then oftentimes they don't even budge a muscle. And there have been some situations where I've researched with UTV on like my main property, and whenever I drive by, there will be a mature buck. There's this one spot, it's called Adams Field, and there's a small, I don't know, acre and a quarter food plot located up in Adams Field, and there's also a lot of, it used to be a clear cut, now it's just kind of grown up over the course of 7 years or 6 years or something, and everything is chest to, maybe double my height high. It's all really thick and high stuff and pretty dense. You can't see through it well. And there was a buck that was bedded around 10 yards, maybe less, off of the edge of the road that everybody always drives on. So I took the UTV and I drove right past him, and he didn't even look in that direction. He just stayed tucked up that entire time. So he's super comfortable. Now, if that UTV, if I pulled it up next to him and I
Stop.
stopped
Yeah.
and then I shut it off, then I'm sure that he would freaking hate that, and he'd lift his head and he would immediately become interested in it. I didn't do it in that example, but I have done it in other examples where whether it was a hunter that was getting dropped off by a truck, and then now he exited the truck and he's on an e-bike, or an e-bike that drove in and a bunch of deer watched him kind of move in, and then he stopped the e-bike and he got off of it. Whenever a human kind of takes their feet and steps them on the ground, then I think everything realizes like something is changing. And
Yeah.
or the moment that you walk into the edge of the woods, it's just you kind of left your path, you left that trail that you were supposed to be on, and that piques everything's ears up if they can hear you or see you, that is. And it's definitely gonna cause them to be interested in it.
All right. You mentioned a little bit earlier about rain and when the rain stops, and I'm super curious to see what you've observed right after a hard rain. We always hear that's a great time to be in the woods. Deer are going to get up and start moving. So, what have you learned about rain and how that affects deer movement?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of great times to be in the woods and be hunting, but right after rain is verifiably it's a great time. And one of the things that it was one of those kind of long-standing myths, and it's probably not a factual thing yet, just based off the amount of information I have on it, but I have seen it a lot of times. Is post rain, mature buck kind of, it seems like a heightened amount of scrape activity taking place right after a rain, and I think that's definitely a thing where it comes in heavy rain, he stands up out of his bed, and it's as if sometimes you can almost tell whenever a deer is on a mission, like he is freaking aiming
Yeah.
for point A, B, C, D, and like he's hitting check
Yep.
marks everywhere he's
He's
going.
marching. Yep.
And yeah, he's marching. And in those settings, post rain, most mature bucks, it seems like they're doing that. They're on a destination. They're doing something. They know exactly what they're doing. And oftentimes, at the end of wherever they're going, they're hitting a scrape there, and then they move over here, and he hits scrape here, and he hits a scrape here. So they're definitely freshening up scrapes at a heightened rate post rain. And at that, yeah, no, definitely just go be in the woods. I don't know whether you want to go set up on a scrape or you want to just set up in a high traffic area. Get outside on a post rain. Yeah.
What about during a light rain? If you're observing a buck during a light rain, how often are they getting up during that and moving around?
Yeah, I see a tremendous amount of feeding take place during light rains, and just in general, a tremendous amount of just deer activity, if you want to call it that. There's deer up on their feet during light rains, so yeah, no, definitely light rains. The thing is that sometimes on a light rain, I'm not seeing that destinational style mindset, whereas they're freaking moving, they're just cutting through areas and maybe being a little bit more reckless. On a light rain, it seems like everything's dialed back a little bit, and yeah, we're gonna kind of move through this area and browse a little over here, and we might kind of shove a couple does around over here and tinker with this younger buck over here, things like that. But they're not really just freaking beating down miles out on the trail. They're more so, everything seems a little more controlled in that setting with a light rain. But they're definitely very comfortable with a light rain, and they get up and they feed a lot during that time frame. From what
Yeah.
I've
Why do you
observed.
think? Why do you think that is? Do you think because I always find myself thinking, during a light rain, the leaves are soft. It's hard for them to, they utilize all their senses to avoid predators and stay safe, right? Like
Mhm.
they can't hear as well. Um, I think I'm actually not sure if they can smell better or worse during a light rain. I think there's some research on that, but they might want to be on their feet so that they can see further, or keep their heads on a swivel. What do you think about that? Like, why do you think they're up on their feet during that light rain feeding?
Yeah, well, I think there's definitely something to the first part of it with, the water adding moisture to, whatever it is that they're eating. I mean, just kind of put that in perspective for yourself whenever you go out and, you're eating something that should be moist. I don't have a good example analogy off the top
Like
of my head, but
a dry
yeah,
cake or something,
dry something, and then you just add milk to it or add just anything and add any kind of moisture to that stinging thing, and it gets better. So there's definitely something to that where a little bit of moisture can make it more palatable for them and digestible to eat. And then also deer can extract quite a bit of moisture that they need for survival just off of the food that they eat. They can't do 100%, but they can definitely get quite a bit of it from that. And versus going and seeking out an actual body of water, so it can kind of extend that time that they need before they have to go out and locate a body of water to drink. But beyond that though, in terms of their senses, I haven't read a lot of things that had suggested that their sense of smell is greater during a light rain. It would potentially make sense, and because there's moisture in the air, but also that moisture would be heavier, so you think it might make things fall a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Um,
Also,
yeah,
wettens their nose.
yeah, it could wet their nose, but or maybe they feel like wherever they are bedded, like you'd said, they feel at a disadvantage at that point. Wherever there's a light rain, so they need to stand up and move around, and at that point, everything in the woods is kind of at a disadvantage. They can't hear as well, they can't see as well, they can't anything really as well. So deer kind of feel more comfortable up on their feet because they trust their senses over whatever that predator is that's trying to get them in their mind. That could be it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's change it over to snow. I mean, I don't think you guys don't get as much snow as we do up in the Northeast, but do you see a similar thing in the hours you've been out while it has been snowing? Is a light snow? Are they up on their feet feeding kind of this in a similar way as they are with the rain?
Yeah, I've only ever seen one time where it was snowing so hard that it seemed to actually cause the deer to bed down. Uh, Very seldom, whenever it's snowing in my area, do they ever bed. They're almost always up on their feet. And it could be because my deer are not used to the introduction of snow, and they just in general don't like bedding in the snow. So they're always up on their feet browsing. They could be getting colder than your deer would be. Maybe they just don't have the same coat structure that a deer up north would, and they feel like they need to be up on their feet moving nonstop and eating nonstop to keep their bodies warm. But I have recorded a couple times though where there's just from my area what we would call a blizzard. It is in no way a blizzard, but a hard snow.
Yeah.
We'll get 8 to 10 inches, and during that hard snow, a lot of the deer will bed out. And whenever they're bedding, they're just kind of curled up and tucked into a ball. It's actually kind of sad looking. I feel like you could make like one of those animal help shelter type videos
Yeah.
off of it, and overlay the sad music on it.
Oh,
But
that's right up your alley for your editing in one of your
oh,
videos.
yeah, I'm sure that I could. Maybe I'll add that in the next one. But just kind of a group of does that are all tucked up in balls and tucked near each other, and they're just covered in snow. And then all of a sudden they'll stand up, shake off the snow, and move on. And oftentimes the kind of the fascinating thing that I've seen with snow in this area is that they'll use their beds to feed in. Oftentimes, their body heat will kind of melt off the snow in that area, and then they can kind of use that as a starting point to start browsing for food, whether it's leftover acorns or whatever it might be. But they'll utilize their beds in the woods for feeding purposes. Yeah.
Cool. And then what about let's go to the wind topic now. On what have you noticed on super windy days? What are the deer doing? Let's narrow it to mature buck. What's a mature buck doing when it's extremely windy, like 40, 50 mile an hour plus winds?
Yeah, I was going to narrow it down to mature bucks for you if you didn't, because pretty much all other deer that aren't mature in that setting, unless it's a young buck that just has no idea what he's doing, he's just kind of confused and he has these emotions and he doesn't know where to place them, then he might be running up around and being an idiot. But a mature buck, I feel like that lands on the individualistic kind of behavior topic, where some bucks kind of they feel comfortable getting up on their feet and moving throughout that time frame, and they seem like nothing ever changed. Is there any wind outside at all? They don't acknowledge its presence almost. Whereas some other bucks, they will bed down that entire time. And I think that I've potentially documented enough to say that that would be an individualistic style behavior where I have one buck that I know for a fact is just a lunatic all the time. And then you could have, well, heck, take the buck that I named Winter, for example. That main day that I play in that video, throughout that video, that would be a setting where it was a blizzard for my area, right? Like it was snowing extremely hard that day as well, and he moved the entire time. He never bedded down. Every other deer in the woods, there were over 150 that I had probably located that day, all bedded down during that time frame. But he was up on his feet. He was just being a lunatic. So every once in a while, you just have a buck that just doesn't care. But I've also recorded him. He was the one, I've said this a lot, but he was the one that was bedded on the north side of a slope with a north wind at 30 miles per hour, and it was sleeting. It wasn't snow or rain. It was sleeting in his face, and he was just sitting there staring into the storm, just taking it. And it's like, that's crazy. What are you doing? And so, yeah, individualistic behaviors is what I would tie that to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so much of hunting and trying to understand deer, it just ends up coming back to every deer is totally different, and there isn't like a blanket, there's no blanket rules that deer follow, it's just every deer is completely different. And I've had so many times if I'm up in a saddle or a stand or something, and I'm hunting and it's not too windy, and then the wind picks up, 10 o'clock, and it's really windy, I'll climb down out of the tree, and I love to still hunt, even with my bow, during super windy conditions. And I've had a lot of encounters with big mature bucks that are just on their feet during that time. They can't hear me coming. If the wind's in my face, I think it's a really cool. I haven't been able to kill one with my bow during that, but I've had 3 or 4 opportunities in the last couple of years where I've walked up on it and it almost happened. They just didn't, walk where I needed them to. So yeah, I mean, I've seen mature bucks on their feet during those high wind scenarios where I think a lot of hunters just wouldn't be out there trying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely wouldn't bat an eye at a high wind day, or, depending on your deer and kind of what you've seen and experienced with that one. Even if you had a day that just kind of got nasty, I wouldn't be opposed to, if it was the only day that you could get out there and just full send it, going out there and trying to make something happen, because I've seen them move through some pretty interesting environmental conditions that you would otherwise think would not be very common. So.
Are there any conditions out there that you would just say, all right, at least narrow down to this condition, you might as well just stay home on your couch or not get out of bed?
Yeah.
Is there anything like that?
Probably the number one thing, but oftentimes, I don't know about you, but whenever we get showers in this area, rain showers, the really hard bit, that just crazy, like you're getting hit with a pound droplet every single time it slams down onto your car hood type situation. Like, it's just ridiculous how hard it's raining. Whenever it's doing that, then they'll get down. But oftentimes for this area, those little spurts, they last 15 to 30 minutes, and then it cools up, automatically after. So yeah, whenever there are little bits, whenever it's just ridiculous. And then the opposing side that I haven't been able to research yet is like, we're in Tornado Alley where I'm at, and whenever a tornado moves through, and we've got, here a couple weeks ago, we had like 70 to 80 mile per hour winds ripping shingles off people's roofs. I'm sure the deer were bedded down during that time. I don't know, because I'm not going to fly my drone during 70, 80 mile per hour winds. Right?
Imagine that footage, though. That would be insane.
Oh,
this is how a deer behaves during a tornado.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the fastest I've ever flown in is like 44 miles per hour, which it is not recommended to fly that big. It was the DJI M30T. I wouldn't fly the smaller ones than that, but yeah, I've taken it up to 40 mile per hour winds.
Crazy. Cool. All right. Well, let's get into just a couple minutes of housekeeping, talk Huntstock a little bit, and then we'll jump into some more questions. Yeah, we're excited that you're coming to Huntstock. I know you haven't been to one before, but what are you excited about for the show? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, it'll actually be the first show that I've been to. I've been invited to a couple others that happened earlier this season. None of them in the same style as Huntstock is, but I wasn't able to make the timeline for any of them. But this will be the first one I've ever been to. So I honestly, I don't really even know what to expect. I'm just kind of a good old Southern Missouri boy, a hick, and I don't really get out of the house much. I stay in this area pretty often. I don't really leave the state too often. I know I'd said this last year. I went to Indiana. I also, I traveled down south a little bit. Went to Mississippi and Alabama and a couple other states over there and did some research. But for the most part, prior to last year, I don't get out of the state too often, other than for like maybe a 1 week vacation with my wife. But so it noted that it'll definitely be really cool to. I've never been in that state, Wisconsin, in the first place, so that'll be fun. And then Huntstock in itself, it just looks like the environment that's created is really fascinating. The people that you're going to have there, the influencers, whether it's the hunting public all the way to Barry and Danny Infalt will be there. I mean, those guys that I've admired my entire life, right? And then now I'm going to get to go and be there in person with a lot of those people. It's just, I mean, that's super cool in the first place. In terms of like, I think I've talked to you about this, but like whatever I'm going to do for my booth and things like that, I'm
Yeah.
highly, I mean, I'm on my own. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I'll figure it out, I'm sure. But even if it's just me sitting there with a drone and like a t-shirt, just, hi guys, I don't really, I don't know what I'll set up, but I'm sure I'll figure something out. But I'm overall, I'm super excited for it, just to meet everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe bring a TV and show some of your really cool footage in a montage or something would be pretty compelling. And maybe you can even premiere a new video or something at Huntstock. Like put together something short, and we can figure out. But there's whatever you come up with, like we always try to instill in all of the exhibitors, whether they're a content creator or it's a hunting brand or something, to just do something that's outside the box. You're good at thinking about things like that. I mean, you're trailblazer with a new kind of YouTube video and content, new kind of research. Like I think you've got that kind of mind where something will click and you'll be like, yeah, this is an interesting way to go about exhibiting at a hunting show.
Yeah.
Just don't be afraid of, no idea is too big. We encourage everybody to like think outside the box. Like we have ideas of like building like a 10-story deer out of wood and setting it on fire one day, and like any idea, it's like, it's not too big for Huntstock. We have this mindset of like not saying no. If somebody has something they want to do and it's going to add to the show and be super cool and fun, for the attendees, everything goes back to the attendee experience and what's going to make the experience cooler for them that they're not normally going to get at like any other trade show.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, so Huntstock Midwest, it's in Wisconsin, Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, at Dodge County Fairgrounds, July 17th through the 19th. Derrick just mentioned, some of the guys that'll be there. We put together what we think is the best seminar lineup in the country, especially when it comes to, public land, boots on the ground, guys who just outwork everybody and have accumulated so much knowledge. So we've got seminars happening all 3 days on multiple stages, from the hunting public to Dan Infalt, Barry Wensel, John Eberhart, Jared Scheffler from Whitetail Adrenaline, who's an awesome dude, and he really loves ground hunting. He's going to be doing seminars on ground hunting all 3 days. Bernie Behringer, the bear professor, is going to have a lot of knowledge on bear hunting. And then we're bringing guys from the Northeast down too, who are, trackers. And the North Woods, tracking is a really old art and way to hunt deer, and it's very big in the Northeast. So the Benoit family, you guys might have heard of the Benoit family. Larry Benoit was kind of the first ever quote unquote hunting influencer, was on the cover of Sports Afield magazine and widely regarded as one of the greatest hunters ever to live, if not the greatest. His son Lanny, who a lot of people think is the best hunter that's still alive today, he's incredibly accomplished. He's just a down-to-earth, awesome dude, very funny guy. He's coming there for the first time to do seminars. So anybody in the Midwest that's kind of been curious about tracking, I know northern Minnesota, the Upper Peninsula, and Michigan, you have some tracking opportunities out there. So don't miss your chance to like come and hear from Lanny Benoit himself. Lanny used to go to Wisconsin as a snowmobile racer. He's like legendary in that community too. He's won a bunch of World Series, so he's been out that way in the snowmobile space, but never to do seminars and meet other hunters. So don't miss a chance to meet him and Rick Labbe, who's kind of Lanny's protege, and he's an absolute killer too, out of the Northeast. So both of them are coming down they're going to do a joint seminar all 3 days. They work well together. So there's some great tracking stuff too. And then other things about the show, we just try to be different than every other trade show out there. Our show definitely feels more like a deer camp and less like a typical trade show. And we give away $40,000 in door prizes, anything from hunting trips and brand new bows and optics and stands and saddles and all kinds of great gear. We make sure that we have an awesome door prize pool. If you go to a typical trade show, there might be one or two door prizes, and it might be like a cooler or something that's getting raffled off, and you have hardly any chance at it at all. We give away more than 100 prizes, and they're high-end stuff. So that's always a really cool thing at Huntstock. We end every day of the show with a giant door prize giveaway. You got to be there to win. So, we'll have 1,000+ people standing around the stage at the end of each day looking to win some cool prizes. So that's really fun. We make it interactive. There will be demos. The hunting public's actually going to be doing something where they're going to be shooting, taking people over to the archery range and shooting with fans and walking them through different, scenarios you might encounter when you're hunting, whether it's on the ground or you're elevated or you got a bedded deer and all these different things. And they're going to shoot a THP video that'll go up on their YouTube with their fans at the show. So things like that, cool interactive experiences will be happening all weekend. We've got camping right on site there. So people, if you're traveling a long distance, you got a camper, you got an RV or something, you can book a campsite right through Dodge County Fairgrounds and stay the entire weekend, which really adds to that deer camp environment. And that's a really awesome time to network with people, make new friends. And that's the best way to experience the show. So if you want to come to it, get your tickets online and make sure that you book a campsite. I think there's like 20 left right now. But you can stay right on site for all 3 days, starting on Thursday night and Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So that'll be a lot of fun. If you want to get your tickets, get them online at www.huntstockevents.com and use code DD10 for Derrick Dixon. Code DD10 will get you 10% off of your tickets. That's the cheapest way to get tickets at the door. They'll be a little more expensive. We don't have any ticketing fees online. And with that 10% off code, that's the cheapest way to get it. So huntstockevents.com, click on Huntstock Midwest, and then click through to get your tickets and use code DD10. So the other thing too, we've got a hunting exhibitors only philosophy at Huntstock. So you're not going to find any window salesmen there or no solar panels and no pickles. Sorry if you guys are going to a hunting show looking for pickles. This is not the show for that. So all you pickle fans out there, sorry, but you're not going to find it at Huntstock. We've got like Vortex, 6 Hour, Tacticam, Bushnell, Ozio, Code of Silence, other camo apparel brands, Arsenal, Buzzard Roost, and other saddle and mobile hunting brands coming, stands and blinds, archery shops, outfitters. There's plenty to do there for kids too, and kids under 12 get in for free at Huntstock, so don't buy tickets for your kids that are under 12 as you're checking out. They always get in for free. A couple of other things real quick. We'll get back into the podcast. We're also doing a VIP party on Thursday night at Huntstock, so the day before the show actually opens on Friday. If you get a VIP ticket, you can come hang out with everybody on Thursday night. It's super laid back. THP will be doing meet and greets and some big giveaways from their sponsors during that night. And Ted Zangerly is going to be performing live music that night, which is sweet. He's super stoked for that. It'll be his biggest gig in front of a big crowd. So you'll be treated to some sweet music from Ted. And then First Responder Friday, the first day of the show. It's always First Responder Friday at Huntstock. So if you're a military veteran or a police or a fire or EMS, you'll get extra perks at Huntstock. Whether it's extra door prize entries to our main door prize pool for that day. And we have a special kind of exclusive door prize pool only for first responders. So a bunch of cool stuff happening. Make sure you don't miss Friday. Friday is kind of typically the slower day. And it's more laid back than Saturday, Sunday, less crowded. Awesome day to be there. and tickets are only $30 on Friday. Saturday and Sunday, their 1-day passes are $40, so it's cheaper on Friday too. So don't miss out on Friday. And then Huntstock Northeast, Derrick won't be at that one. We got a great seminar lineup going on there too. Dan Infalt, Bo Martonic, Joe Donito, and Jim Massett, a couple of tracking legends from the Adirondacks, will be there doing tracking seminars. Jeff Doyle, and then Lanny Benoit and Rick Labbe will be there as well. Jake Bennett and a bunch of other guys. We also do a film festival at Huntstock Northeast on Thursday night. That'll be showing all Northeastern hunting films, and we have a 20 target 3D course utilizing the farm that we do it on, Wildwood Farm. It's a beautiful property, and we build that 3D course basically as real life hunting scenarios. It's not like going to attack where you're going to be shooting out at 120 yards. The Northeast, we don't have scenarios like that. We build it up close and personal, and really give you guys real life hunting scenarios that you might encounter. So it's a good way to kind of go through the motions and get your reps in before the season starts. So those are some unique things happening at Huntstock Northeast. We got a great list of exhibitors there as well. And then Shedstock. Shedstock is May 30th at Wachusett Brewery in Westminster, right down the road from where we host Huntstock, Wildwood Farm. Shedstock is May 30th, 2 p.m. And basically it's a get together for people who love shed hunting. We got some of the best shed hunters in the Northeast all going to that, bringing their collections, both, their hauls from this year and then some of their best, antlers throughout the year. So if you want to see some really big moose and deer antlers from the Northeast, all around the Northeast, all the different states, come out to Shedstock. Be super laid back, a lot of fun, free for everybody, and good food and drink. So that's it for my spiel. Let's go back into the podcast with Derrick Dixon. Do you worry sometimes that the level of information that we're acquiring these days, whether it's from trail cameras through online content, and flying drones, do you worry that this could make hunting too easy someday?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good topic. I was still sitting here enamored. Did you just read all that information off the top of your head? Because
I had some notes, but yeah.
Okay, I was about to say, oh my goodness, that was impressive. That was like next level stuff. But yeah, no, I feel like it definitely could. It depends on how people utilize it and where you take it, right? I mean, trail cameras, which have already been here, and a controversial topic for a lot of people. If you run 5 trail cameras across 500 acres, that's different than running 50 trail cameras across 500 acres. So you kind of make or break that for yourself with the technology advancements and making it too easy. I think at the moment, barring buying a thermal drone and watching your deer exactly where they're located and then going out and hunting that specific deer, barring doing something like that, if you're utilizing trail cameras, I think more often than not, it's actually confusing people, and it's causing them to overthink things, overanalyze,
Absolutely.
not go out and hunt, and it's kind of taking away from the hunt from that perspective. And people really need to kind of let loose a little bit more and let their instincts kick in versus allowing the technology to influence their hunting decisions, and just get out in the woods and go hunting. That's kind of my opinion on that.
Yeah. Do you think technology is outpacing woodsmanship to an extent?
Probably for younger people. Yeah, I would say that it could be. But I mean, at the same time, you have guys like the hunting public. I don't know what their demographics are on YouTube. I know what mine are. Quite a few young guys, watch my channel, and I kind of talk about that pretty consistently in terms of how woodsmanship is about the number one thing that you could do. Even once again, barring a thermal drone and just sitting there and watching your deer nonstop. But if you're attempting to implement trail cameras and any other form of technology, I know that there are fancy ways that you can get live streaming cameras out to your setting as well. If you wanted to put I think a long time ago when I was thinking about researching whitetail deer, I thought of an idea of shooting internet out to, there's no internet out there, shooting internet out to my farm from a cell tower, and then connecting it with basically unified point to point, whatever they are, and pulling in internet down there, and then shooting that internet to every single tower across the property, and then having a camera that's powered by a solar panel with an external battery, and having a live stream shot of that area so I could see
Yeah.
feeding activity in the evening. That was kind of an initial idea. But nowadays that you can get away with doing that a lot cheaper than shooting something from a cell tower. But that was my initial idea. And that technology exists. It's for sale out there. I mean, you can go buy it if you want to and live stream your field directly to your house if you see fit. Does that help you as a hunter? Probably not. I would think. So yeah, there's probably some young people that are coming up that are very technology influenced, and maybe they'll lean that way. But I think that the more you dig and the more you get interested into this topic of hunting, then the more you're going to find the serious people, the people that are good at it, and a lot of them, they all recommend boots on the ground. That's number one thing. So
Yeah, and to keep it fun, like to an extent, it
oh
just
my
can
gosh,
take
yeah,
it can take the fun out of everything
yeah.
if you're relying on technology too much. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
the whole
and I mean, yeah, take the fun. It's kind of like the analogy of, if you were fishing, we'll go back to fishing, and say you had a pond of largemouth bass, and every single bass in that pond was 5 pounds to 7 pounds. It'd be pretty fun to just sit there and hammer 5 to 7 pound largemouth bass for quite a while. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, this is getting kind of boring, and I would rather go to like a random creek and hook onto a pound and a half smallmouth
yeah,
versus sit here and hammer 5 to 7 pound largemouth all day long, just because I know in the back of my mind, like
yep,
in my heart of hearts, that smallmouth is, he's 7 years old, and he's lived there in the wild, and he's just that's a wild animal, that's a wild creature. Whereas these pond stocked 5 to 7 pound largemouth bass, it's just not as fun. So I think it's
yeah.
kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. And it's also like the same reason why I still love to go hunt out of my Vermont deer camp every single year, because up there the bucks are not big, but they're few and far between, and you have to really work to get one. Even shooting a 3-pointer, they're just not. It's not the same as hunting around here. So going up there, if I shoot a 3 or a 4-pointer on opening day, to me, I feel just as much joy, if not more, than shooting like a 125-inch buck with my bow down here. It all depends on just where you're at, and like you said, if you're fishing a pond are you fishing a stream that's got 1 to 2 pound fish, but it's harder to do it, the joy you're going to get from catching that is going to outweigh that 5 pound stocked largemouth.
Yeah, by far.
um if you were to stop doing what you're doing and stop the channel today and decide to hunt this year, what is going to be different in how you hunt now than how you hunted before you started doing this? Like, how's your strategy going to change? What are you going to change as a hunter?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I was going to be hunting the properties that I'm researching, then I kind of have a couple spots picked out, right?
Yeah,
And it wouldn't be fair, and it would be to that, at the moment it wouldn't be fair, I should say. And it would be just that I would essentially feel like I'm fishing in a the 5 to 7 pound pond. But if I was to go beyond that and not hunt this property, and it's worth saying that let's say the core research property, that's the main one that I always refer to, 5 to 6 years from now, it's not going to be the same property. Everything will have changed. The habitat's going to change. Some fields might get overgrown, and maybe some stinking Bradford pears will start taking it over or something. Stuff is going to happen, and that'll change the dynamic of how that property flows. Now, the terrain's not going to change, but the habitat itself will change, and that'll shift the way those deer move. And some of those locations that I just mentioned that I have pegged out that would just be phenomenal, they might not be phenomenal in the future. But anyways, with that being said, yeah, no, if I was going to go and just carve out a random place in the Mark Twain National Forest in southern Missouri, and I was going to hunt that, just pure timber, then very first thing I'm going to do is the first thing that I mentioned in the podcast earlier, which is pull up LiDAR and Terrain X, and I'm gonna select. Well, first I'll scan before Terrain X and LiDAR. I'll scan around, and I'll look for locations visually that have a diverse form of habitat. I don't just want pure timber. I want field edges. I want maybe there was a timber cut here in 2019 or something. I want there to be intermixed features, number one. So I'm going to try to find those intermixed features. If I don't have those, then I'm going to have to think beyond that. But most places, I feel like you can find something where there's a little bit of diversity taking place. Then with the diversity, then I'm going to go with LiDAR and Terrain X, and I'm going to pre-map everything out. And then right after that, I'm going to go in person, and I'm going to scout all of those locations that I have said are impassable in terrain, and I'm going to locate potentially new places that are impassable, and I'm also going to check some locations off as well. Maybe that's not they could skim up the side of that if they really wanted to. And actually, it looks like they do. Maybe there's a beat down trail in this really steep portion of terrain. Have you ever seen that where it's almost like a little 2 foot
Mhm.
bench that takes place where every deer is just hammered down this one spot for years.
Absolutely. And the
So
coyotes use it too.
yeah, exactly. And just mark that spot. That's and that's a portion where they train, they travel through it. So go in and do in-person scouting and attempt to locate bedding. If I can locate bedding, then I feel like I'm going to be able to kill the deer in that area. Because if you know where bedding is, and I think I'd seen one person comment something about how he didn't put much stock into bedding, and my brain can't wrap my head around that, I suppose. I think that if you can locate where they're bedding, then it turns into that kind of focal point. And you may have 15 bedding areas across the landscape where you think that this is where these mature bucks are generally located, and you're never going to know which one he's actually truly in. But if you at least, for the most part, just kind of know where he should halfway be, then that's going to lead you into a better situation whenever you're getting set up. And then from there, you just kind of focus on time of season. What time of season is it? What kind of rutting stage are we in? What feeding pattern are the deer on? What available browse is taking place in the area? Was there a burn that had happened in pre-spring this year in a location? And what's coming up in that? When are the acorns going to be dropping? Trying to locate those white oak acorn trees that are potentially in drainage systems or maybe a little bit more out in the open, so that way they can yield a higher mast and they're going to drop sooner than other trees. Just all those little nitty gritty things, trying to figure out where they're going to be at those specific times of season, because understanding that it's constantly shifting is a very important factor into all of this. And bedding could potentially shift as well, but for the most part, a lot of those beds that you're going to find, post winter, whenever you go out and do shed hunting, ideally, those are going to be pretty similar for the most part on a year-to-year basis. Now, if you locate those beds and, like I said, skip 5 to 6 years, they're probably going to change a little bit. Some of them are going to always be there. Some of them could shift. Yeah, basically, I'm just trying to piece together as many variables as possible throughout the season as I can, and then whenever you make it into pre-rut time frame, which for my area would be late October, then in my opinion, at that point, just go and find those funnel locations and set up on them where your wind is going to be, or potentially thermals are going to be shoving your scent into a location that is just you don't exist out there. You are impenetrable, and you can sit out there all day. And if you have the time availability, I'm thinking in the mentality that I would have the time availability to sit out there all day and try to pick off a cruising buck that's going to be moving from through those
Yeah.
terrain features.
And if you sit on it for a week, if you have the availability to sit
Correct.
that for a week, you're going to increase your odds tremendously on that. Like you said, with there's so many variables in every single hunt. And I was talking with Aaron Warburton about this, and I kind of came up with the analogy that every hunt is a fingerprint. Everything, that you can't just take blanket information that you get online and put it into a hunting scenario, because there's so many variables. But the one thing that is constant that you mentioned is the terrain features are not going to change. That's a constant, so you can work off of that. What have you identified? What's your absolute favorite terrain feature?
Well, we have a lot of bluffs in my area, kind of cliffs and just sharp, jagged drop offs. And I like those areas just because I know for a fact they're not going to climb up and down them. They're not a mountain goat. I know I have seen deer kind of defy all odds and shift and shimmy up and down an area where it's like, are you like, kind of halfway bred with an ibex or something? Because just the way that they're capable of jumping up and down, they can do it. But those sheer drop offs of greater than, 4 or 5 feet, they're not going to make that hop. They're not doing it. So whenever I find those terrain features, then it's just like, oh yeah, beautiful. And I'll just go ahead and mark that out. And oftentimes for my area, you'll find those in like a kind of a bowl shape setting, and there will
Mm-hmm.
be a cliff or a bluff that's lining the interior of that bowl. And if you find that, then you know for a fact that they don't walk up and down that bowl, so they're moving around that bowl to get up to the top of that ridge.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes there's going to be a pretty good funnel on one of those opposing sides, and you can either set up at the top of the bowl at the higher point on the ridge and blow your scent over the top, directly into the bowl. But yeah, moral of the story is using all those bluffs to your advantage to shove your scent in those directions, because there's not going to be a deer down below that in that setting. That area below is just kind of arid and there's nothing there, and they're moving around it constantly, so you can feel comfortable shoving your scent in those areas whenever you want to, and you're not going to blow anything out, and you're probably in a pretty high traffic area with a lot of deer movement.
Yeah, and something I really like to do too is once you've identified, let's just say, one terrain feature that you know is a terrain feature, and you've gotten to that level of competency. Okay, there's a bluff, there's a cliff. Then just keep reverse engineering. Like anytime you can add a terrain feature that abuts another terrain feature, you're creating pinch points. So if you can find a place that has 3 terrain features, maybe it's a cliff like that that's going down to along the edge of a pond, right? And they're not going to be walking through that pond. They swim through them every once in a while, but they're not going to if they can avoid it. So you got a pond, and then you've got a steep, cliff edge, and then you've got maybe a saddle or something coming up out of that. Anytime that you can add terrain features to the equation, that just makes those spots, especially if you have the time to sit, for a day or a couple of days in a row in a spot like that during the rut, those can just be killer rut spots. Like, so as you're doing your e-scouting and stuff, and then you got to do boots on the ground, try to stack those features on top of each other, because that's just only going to increase your odds of catching a mature buck, going through there.
And I'm taking my answer back, by the ways, after thinking about it, now that you had a moment to talk and I could sit here and think. Drainages, that's my number one thing. I love drainages.
Yep.
Yeah, the head of drainages, the top of drainages, the highest elevation point around them, and specifically steep drainages. Now, there are drainages where there could be a bench kind of carved within it, where the terrain kind of dips down within the drainage and they can make crossings. But whenever you find those drainages that are just nasty steep all the way down, and there's a lot of deadfall happening in them, and they're kind of jagged with rocks and nasty, almost always deer avoid those, and they'll just move around them and walk the high side of those drainages. And
yes,
what made me
part
think
of the drainage,
what made me think of it is you'd mentioned finding where multiple features come together, and that's one of my favorite things to do, is whenever you can find multiple of those drainages all coming into this kind of general location, and it creates like a saddle here, a saddle here, a saddle here, and maybe you do have the cliffs and bluffs that can potentially aid you in blowing your scent in those directions. But those drainages are just as good as a cliff or a bluff. What did I just say? Blowing your scent down into those drainages is just, that's bar none amazing.
And usually in that scenario you just described, up there at the top where those drainages are kind of coming to a point and there's a little saddle, you're going to find an annual scrape up there, because that's just where all the deer are funneling through. You're going to find a nice scrape, so then you can utilize that to your advantage too. Maybe there's a hard rain, and that after the rain, that could be a killer spot, man. Like you take all the information that you accumulate from however you're learning it, boots on the ground experience, or online podcast. That's one of those scenarios where it's like, all right, we've identified what you just talked about. We found multiple terrain features. We found a couple of drainages all coming up to a flat spot. There's a saddle. Maybe the terrain rises higher after that, and everything is funneling through there. There's probably going to be a scrape there. Go find that thing and sit it during the rut, and then don't be afraid to sit it on a rainy day. Like, get in there, move in while it's raining, and set up in the rain and be there for after that rain. I think you'll increase your success.
Yeah, and if you can find one of those settings as well where it has all of the terrain features converging into one location, but then you mix into that and you have multiple forms of habitat diversity taking place, and that is in my opinion, that's the golden ticket. I wouldn't hunt anywhere else. If you have that and you can find that location, then that is just go sit there all the time. I mean, that is especially during the rut. And I would hold that back for kind of that. I would probably hunt it pre-rut into early rut stage and just nonstop it. That I would just go in, and barring you going in and bumping every single deer in the area, and you're capable of getting set up without doing that, and you're going to be kind of scentless in that setting where you're blowing your scent into a drainage or over the top of a bluff or a cliff, then, I mean, you can just go hunt it whenever you want to. Entry and exit's perfect, and which in most cases you're probably going to bump something, but still you're going to run into success if you're hunting those situations.
Yeah. Don't underestimate an edge, because an edge is also another funnel. It's not a terrain feature, but it's another funnel. So you got multiple terrain features plus an edge. You're looking at a money spot there. Is hunting pressure fundamentally changing deer behavior year after year? What do you think about that? How does increased hunting pressure change the deer behavior? You've observed some deer and how they react to human pressure, but what do you think they're doing to increase hunting pressure?
Yeah. I mean, beyond a deer reacting to kind of their photosensors with it adjusting their testosterone and environmental factors that are taking place, hunting pressure is probably the most important thing that dictates a mature buck's behavior. It probably dictates more than just mature buck's behavior, very importantly as well. But I think does have a higher tolerance for things, and younger bucks are kind of confused, like I said, and they oftentimes they don't really know what they're doing. They have these new emotions and they're confused. But mature bucks, they don't tolerate it near at the rate, I feel. And I think they tolerate it more than people recognize, but they adapt to whatever kind of pressure that is that's being introduced. If it's being introduced in a poor way, like I said earlier, if you're not capable of getting in entry and exit without disturbing the deer in that area, then you're going to start making an effect. And you can get away with it a handful of times. You know, we've seen that a million times with the guys from THP going out and scouting and crawling through beds and making things happen. And they probably made a little bit of an impact that day, but for the most part, it's so new to the deer in that area, their human introduction, that it's just not affecting them, you know, the deer and their behavior at that great of a level, because you're in their house. Like, you just came into this area that this deer has been living in for quite a long time. He has established that this is his home. This is where he likes to be. It has all the things he needs. It has his does. It has food. It has proper security cover, all the things that he is highly desiring. And one human intrusion, two human intrusions isn't going to shove him out of that. But it will put him on a little bit more of alert and make him kind of curious as to why was there human scent in this particular area? What's taking place here? And the more you introduce human scent and human intrusion into a location where a deer is constantly picking you up, then oh yeah, dramatically harder it's going to be to hunt that deer over time. And at a certain point, I think that you can shove a deer out of an area. I think even if you do, though, you know, I've done a lot of intentional bumping testing where you go in and intentionally bump a deer, whether you're giving the deer your scent or you're allowing the deer to visually observe you, or you're just running through the woods and making a lot of racket trying to make it to where they can hear you but they can't smell you. And oftentimes, especially let's say if they get your scent or they know that you're human, they'll leave that area for a couple hours and they'll circle right back through it. And, you know, I've seen them, sometimes it takes up to 10 hours, close to 12 hours before they circle back through that area. We've also seen that on GPS card data, that oftentimes they'll circle back through that home location. And I say all of that just because if you did get to the point where you bumped a deer so bad that he left that area, you were just in his bed every day for 7 days straight,
Yeah.
then I'd say give it 2 weeks and he'll probably be moving back through that area to see if everything's moved away. Because like I said, they grow very comfortable with the fact that that's their home, and they've kind of done all of this preemptive research to make this their home. And a little bit of human intrusion is not going to befuddle that. That could also go down to individualistic behavior, though. Potentially, you might have some deer that don't tolerate human intrusion at all. I mean, they just screw that, gone. I'm out of here. Then you
Yeah.
have some that they might be a little bit more lenient towards it. Like I had one deer this year. He went in and he hit a scrape in a field on a field edge, and he was next to one of my research cameras. This wasn't a camera being used for hunting purposes. It was for me for trail cam research. And I had the idea, I'm gonna just go in and move this camera, right? Kind of as if a hunter, I was just driving around the property, I seen a new fresh scrape, and I'm gonna move my camera onto that scrape because that's where he's at, right? So I went in, I moved the camera around. I probably moved it 20 to 30 yards total, and I moved it around 10 yards from the scrape. So I kept it back a pretty decent distance from the scrape. And it was in the middle of a field, and it was aiming over towards the tree on the edge of the field where he had just made his scrape. And I knew where the deer was, by the way, is because I tracked him from that scrape back to where he was bedding. So I knew that I was entering the situation where he wasn't going to hear me, he wasn't going to see me, he wasn't going to smell me. And I went in, moved the camera, made it happen, got out, and I actually had to leave that evening. I wasn't able to fly, and I wish I was able to fly just so I could see how he reacted immediately on it. But I got a picture of him that evening, about 3 hours after I had came in and moved that camera, and his nose was right up against the camera, and he was just kind of sniffing and checking out the new human intrusion right next to his scrape that he had just made. And the next morning, whenever I flew up to locate that deer, he had relocated around 400 to 500 yards away, which in this type of terrain setting is a completely different ridge system. I mean, he's in a different form of habitat. He's in a complete other location, and he never came back to that area for at least 3 weeks from that
Hmm.
spot.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I did find him back in that area again, but for the most part, he stayed further to the south. He didn't really come back into that area again. So that would be an instance where that deer didn't tolerate me at all. He smelled
Yeah.
me, and it was kind of pre-rut time frame, and he's like,
Yep.
screw that. I've got better areas I can go to. So he did.
Yeah, I think they're just super curious creatures too, and super aware of their surroundings. And I found a lot of times, like probably 80% of the time, when I find just a killer scrape, a nice annual scrape, and hang a camera on that, I'll get 3 or 4 bucks hitting, coming to check out that scrape within like 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours. It seems like once you're in there and you make that and you put that camera up, very soon after you put that camera up, a deer's coming in, whether it's curiosity or it's just the time that they're coming back to check that scrape or not. But you see that a ton. And usually then after that, it's like a week before they come back. Maybe it's on their round or something. But those first couple of days after you hang a camera, it seems like they're coming in there. And so maybe that's a good strategy for, instead of hanging a camera on that, or hang it, but go in there and hunt it right away, because I just see that happening a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that another thing that had been mentioned, me and Zach talked about this on my podcast where we just went down a random rabbit hole, and he was asking about whether or not stands and kind of long-standing human items that are introduced into the woods make an impact on deer. And I haven't personally seen a lot of that, but it's been something that I've been thinking about a lot. And it's probably kind of, whereas like with him, he thinks about funnels now a lot because of me. Now I think about human items out in the woods and their impact on deer a lot, because I I really feel like there's got to be something to it. The more I've gone back and the more I've watched video and where deer are moving in relation to stand locations and things like that, I feel like a lot of hunters have experienced this as well, where whenever you're out in your stand, say you have a long-term ladder stand that sits out in this one spot, and it's always been a pretty good spot, and you're a bow hunter, and you go and you sit in that location, and it just seems like you've got this weird bubble around
Yeah.
you, like a
Yeah.
50 to 75 yard bubble. You always see deer in that location, but it's just like, what the heck? They're always traveling
Just out
within
of
this,
range.
yeah,
Yeah.
just out of range of this bubble. And it's like, if I could just close that gap in that bubble. And so I think there's something to it. I haven't made the full connection yet with the drone, but that's something I think about all the time now.
Yeah, it's just that just goes to show you how important, I think, being a mobile hunter and doing hanging hunts rather than setting up permanent stand locations. I just think that's super important these days.
Yeah.
Try not to leave a trace in the woods or a permanent fixture whenever you
Hmm.
can.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Um, do you think that deer communicate with each other more than we realize?
Probably so. One fascinating thing that I see a lot is, well, actually, I'll take this two ways. First, there's a lot of interaction between does and doe groups, and I turn that back towards like CWD, which is fascinating, just because the ban of salt licks and the ban of corn and baits and things like that in states where, I'll use Missouri as the test subject example. They started banning those things in the state, which was probably for the right reasons, but they do absolutely nothing to ban them because deer are licking each other all the time, face to face. I mean, they're constantly pruning one another, and they're always licking each other. It's just like, okay, well, that's
Yeah.
a waste of time to go ahead. They're constantly swapping saliva. Moral of the story. But the other side of that, one fascinating thing that I've seen a lot is mature buck interaction with younger bucks, and I've even seen it. And this is really, in my opinion, really fascinating, because the buck that I was tracking, he was kind of a little bit of more of one of those wild bucks, just a little bit more of a lunatic, didn't tolerate much, always bedded on his own, was never within a couple hundred yards of other deer. He was very sedentary on his own. And one time he had a younger buck move into him, and he was mature. He was five plus. I think he was five. I'm going to estimate it 5 years old at least. And he had a younger buck that was immature come up to him, and he was probably maybe 2 years old, just a little forked horn. And he had moved in and started kind of trying to spar with that mature buck. And the
Yeah.
mature buck's bedded on the ground, and he's got the young buck's got his head down, and he's kind of ramming into his body and ramming in up near his antlers and trying to rack his head into his antlers and things like that. And the older buck's just kind of not really, kind of, if you've ever seen like a data bear, like a big old black bear or something, and kids are, or the female, and she's got her babies playing around her or whatever, and then she's just kind of annoyed and she turns her back to them. It's like, leave me alone. Go back and go play
Yeah.
over there, kids.
Yeah.
Same thing. And then all of a sudden he had stood up and he kind of lowered his head with him and he started racking his antlers with him a little bit, but he wasn't actually obviously putting up any sort of fight, letting the younger buck kind of bully him around a little bit. And then they proceeded to stand there for like 20 minutes and clean one another. The young buck was cleaning the mature buck's face. The mature buck was cleaning the young buck's face. And this is like November 5th. I mean, we're right on peak rut for my area. And I just thought that was interesting. It's like, well, that's not the idea that I've had at all, especially for this deer. This deer has like a broken G3 on one side and a snap G2 that he snapped back when he was in velvet. Now it's kind of bulbous up and pointed out to one direction. And here he is in peak rut with a young buck, and they're just hanging out together.
Yeah, check this out. This is something I filmed last year. Exactly what you were talking about. I mean, these two deer were just, it was like 3 or 4. It got uncomfortable for a little while, you know. You're like,
Yeah.
you're like, dudes, like, give it up, man. Like, this is a little like that younger buck was just grooming him for 3 minutes straight, you know.
Yeah.
But it was so cool to see, man. It's like,
just the fact that it takes place. I mean, it's not the idea that a lot of people have whenever you get into that time of season.
yeah.
But they absolutely do kind of, I would call that communicating in a way and kind of cleaning one another and just hanging out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one
Yeah,
time, I mean, I've kind of wondered, is that like somehow a distant brother, or like what's the relation, or are they just two deer in the wild and it's like, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back type situation? I don't know. But
or is it like, is it his son and it's like a little Tom Brady situation where, you know, where kisses his son on the lips for a little bit too long, you know, and it gets a little awkward.
I was going to take it the Bambi route, but Tom Brady is fine as well.
So have you ever watched a mature buck that made like a decision that completely surprised you, or you were just like, whoa, that seemed a little bit odd?
Yeah, I've seen them move through areas that didn't really make sense. Well, one game that I like to play whenever I'm watching a mature buck bedding is I'll kind of guess where he's going to go, and I'll probably make videos doing this in the future, just like kind of live recording myself doing it, and then we can all make guesses together because it's a fun idea. And I'll sit there and I'll create like 3 paths where I think he's going to move out of that bedding area, and then I'll give one of them like a 80 to 90% chance this is the one that he should do. And the others are like, if he doesn't do that one, he's going to do one of these 2. And there's no other options. He has to do one of those 3, in my opinion. And then he'll stand up and he'll do something completely different. And it just doesn't follow any of those trails. He walks with his back into the wind. He walks with what I would have thought to be a disadvantage with thermals in that setting. And he moves out into the open and into a location that if somebody had been there with a rifle in rifle season, they easily would have been able to poke him and everyone would have shot him. And it's just kind of confusing. Like, why did you expose yourself so much along that trek all of a sudden? But all of these other trips that you've made, like, you know, let's say 50 of them, they were all very calculated. But then all of a sudden you make this one and it's just a random, you didn't follow the script at all. Which, by the way, is worth noting is most of the time whenever I try to guess their trail out of their bed, sometimes I will guess it out of one of my 3. And then sometimes I also will guess it. They'll hit that 90 percentile one in my brain that like this is the one they're going to do. But for the most part, they kind of do something a little bit beyond my scheme of thought process. Very seldom do I ever guess what they're going to do. It's pretty difficult.
I think you've done a video on this, but maybe you can just do a quick recap on your observations. What do you notice about how they travel with the wind? Is it like, you know, the old magazines and everybody has commonly thought where they're going to be walking into the wind with their nose to the wind more often than not? What have you kind of observed in terms of wind direction, thermals, and all of that, and how they move through the terrain utilizing that?
Yeah, I think terrain dictates the importance of this, but for my area specifically, where you have a decent amount of terrain that's being introduced to it, I think that wind takes a second place setting to thermals. Thermals is first in terms of importance by far in a hill country setting. And I haven't made that video yet. That's been one that I promise, and I'll continue to promise it for everybody, that I am going to make a video on thermals, and it will be posted before this next deer season, at least for Missouri. It'll be posted before September 15th.
It's probably going to be one of those hour-long ones, though. They're so intricate and so much information.
It's going to be a massive one, and that's part of it. I mean, Well, I think that there are things that have been overcomplicated in the hunting industry, and there are things that have been oversimplified. And I think thermals is one of those that have been oversimplified dramatically, and it's become confusing. Where thermals they rise in the morning and they fall in the evening. Period. And then you have people that start getting a little more thought process on it, where well the sun rises and those slopes that are being hit by the sun, those are starting to begin to rise, but there might be a portion where they're kind of swirling, and then it wraps around, and those ridges start cooling that were hit in the morning, and there's all these shifting thermals that are taking place. That's kind of the more advanced thought process. And then you can get more nitty and gritty and start looking at inversion layers and things like that. And that's kind of where that video is going to go, is we're going to start looking at the science behind what's actually taking place with thermals. And there's going to be a 30-minute portion of it that'll probably be a drag for a lot of people. But if you're a really serious guy into hunting and you want to understand it to the upteenth degree, then that'll be a really good video. And it will be one of those. It'll be probably an hour long video, and it'll be one of my longest videos. But it just has to be, and there's going to be a lot of motion graphics and all sorts of stuff to explain it. But anyways, that's I think thermals are number one though. Moral of the story, in terms of whenever there's terrain introduced. Now in flat terrain, I'm not 100% sure. My next video I'm posting is on agriculture, and I went and researched agriculture, and part of it was in Indiana and part of it was in Iowa and a couple other states. And I don't know the importance and level that wind is actually playing in terms of dictating where they're going to move out in the open. It almost seems like in those settings, there's so many deer that nothing really matters. There's some situations where I think that the total acres I researched was 3,800 acres. And out of the 3,800 acres, there was close to 1,000 does on 3,800 acres. And that's a lot of does.
Yeah.
I think there was 190 bucks, 38 of them were mature, so it was one mature buck per 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a very high rate. Whenever you have that many deer and that many dominant mature bucks, and there were 152, I believe, young bucks, there's so many deer in that setting, and there's also so much available food, and there's such a limited cover that they just kind of move out, and they just gravitate out into the food. And your best bet in that setting is to just be a rifle hunter, sit in a blind and pray that the deer you wanted to shoot that day walks out on the opposing side of the field. And you'll probably have success with that at some point. The hard part about that with agriculture is whenever you introduce a bow into the equation, it all of a sudden becomes really difficult now. And now you have to get within close proximity to a deer where there's a population rate of a tremendous amount of deer per, one deer per 3 acres, I think is about
You
what
got a
that.
million eyeballs on you, a million noses. Yeah.
And it becomes difficult really quick. The only benefit that you get with that is the fact that if you do go in and you bump 20 deer, the odds of you having 20 more deer move by you, throughout the time of that day is pretty decent. And I think there's like a 20% chance that one of those deer would be a mature buck in this setting in my research that I'd done. So that's also a really good, I like those odds, 20% chance out of all those deer. So I don't know though. In the end, I don't know that wind plays a massive role in agriculture just because there's so many deer, but so kind of flat terrain. But you get into hill country, and I think it's thermals.
I got a question for you, and then I want to get back. So thermals have been oversimplified. I want to ask you, what do you think has been undersimplified? Because you said there are those things. But before we do that one, what do you think about the amount of sign that bucks lay down? Something that I've kind of noticed over the years, and have had some conversations with folks up here in the Northeast about, is it seems like when there's more competition, for does, so a better buck to doe ratio. It's almost maybe 1-to-1 in some places. So there's more competition for those few does. It seems like they lay down a lot more sign. They're more aggressive with their sign. And then in a scenario like you just outlined, where there's so many more does and the buck to doe ratio could be 1-to-4 or 1-to-5 or something like that, they don't seem as adamant about laying down sign. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so one of the connections that I make in that video is going to be about why mature bucks are so much bigger whenever you get up into agriculture. And one of the analogies that I make related to that video is in southern Missouri. We'll go back to fishing. I'm always going to go back to fishing now. I'm in a fishing mindset. But in Lake Taneycomo over near Branson, there are these brown trout that have been introduced into that body of water, and they are infertile. They're males oftentimes, and they're infertile, so they can't breed. They don't go through a rutting phase, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
And there was one caught
Unix.
here recently that was close to 40 pounds, and that's 4 pounds off of the world record, which was caught in New Zealand. And that's kind of insane. First of all, a 40-pound brown trout. But the reason he got so big is because he's infertile, right?
He's got no sex drive, so the only thing he's thinking about is food. That's how
Yeah,
he,
correct.
gets his dopamine.
Yeah, he's a fat man. And we see this in deer as well. Whenever they jump a fence and they lose one of their boys, then all of a sudden his antlers kind of turn into that ball of weird velvety whatever. But if you watch his body mass, he becomes tremendously fatter. He just becomes massive. I've seen this in southern Missouri, where a buck on an agriculture setting in southern Missouri, which, previously he was like a 220-pound mature buck, he ended up having that unfortunate thing happen to him, and he had the balled up velvet, little knobs on his head, and he turned into a 300+ pound deer. He was massive.
Wow.
Huge freaking deer. I mean, giant deer. He looked like a cow standing next to the other mature bucks in like a summer photo. But I think part of that, kicking back to agriculture, these deer are obviously, they're not infertile, but they have so many does available to them that, just like you said, they don't have to lay down as much sign. They don't have to have as long of a rutting phase and a seeking phase, because they're not having to seek anywhere. Everything is right next to them constantly. So yeah, they are a lot more sedentary, and that rutting portion, if you do any amount of research into it, into agriculture, that rutting portion is extremely hard and fast, and it happens just like bam, and it's gone. Whereas if you look in my area, so Missouri, that rutting phase happens for a pretty dang long time. We start noticing rutting activity in kind of middle to late October, and that can last all the way until kind of the early December range. And I've recorded it lasting into late December, early January. And then
Absolutely.
there's
Same with
another
me.
peak that happen. I mean, there's
Yep.
peaks that are constantly happening with seeking phases, and that all has to do with whenever, maybe you have an early fawn that was born here, so those fawns are coming in early December, and then you have a late fawn that was born, and that fawn's coming in a little bit later, and all of these fawns have grown up, so all of their cycles are slightly different all the way across the board. So there's this massive form of variability in agriculture. I just think there's just so many of them, and they get bred out, and I don't know. I think that there's a lot more of that infertile style of activity that's taking place in agriculture, and it's not as wild as these other areas are.
Yeah, the more I keep hearing from you, I think southern Missouri is very similar to Massachusetts, the area that I'm hunting, because everything's lining up. It's pretty interesting. It's all I see rutting behavior all the way through January here. Especially if we have a big, there's one place that I hunt that there's at least 20 does in the doe group. And that area, the rut starts October 15th. You're seeing chasing, you're seeing 3 bucks chasing a doe, sparring happening. And then it continues all the way into January, because the late born fawns are, starting to come into heat then. And there's so many does going into rut going into heat at different times throughout the year. And I think it's really fun. Like, I love hunting places like that.
Yeah, most of the deer from my area, a lot of the younger bucks and a couple of the mature bucks, they'll start bacheloring up in that early December phase, kind of after the post rut has kind of happened, and they're settling down into late season activity, and they'll all group up into those bachelor groups. And then you'll always have a couple of those mature bucks, though, that they don't bachelor up, and they don't tolerate it. And those are the ones that are kind of continuing that heightened activity. And then even those
loners,
grouped up bucks, the ones that have decided they're going to group up, every once in a while they'll vary out of that group to kind of go and find that fawn that's coming into estrus late into the middle of January, and he'll leave that group and start seeking again all of a sudden, whereas he was just grouped up for like a month straight not doing anything. Then he'll decide he's going to start seeking. So the rut's not really hard for this area, kind of in the December and January, but there's definitely rutting activity that's taking place at a decent clip.
Yeah. What's something that you've noticed about buck hierarchies and groups? Something cool that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, all of the younger bucks respect the mature bucks with a vast amount of effort. Pretty interesting. The mature bucks, I think that younger bucks are enamored by mature bucks, and they're very interested in them, and that they want to be nearby them as much as they can. But they realize that there's this fence around the mature buck, where if I step within this region, I'm probably screwed. So they just kind of generally stay with outside of those bounds, which what we'd mentioned earlier with the really young bucks coming in and having those emotional moments with the mature buck was kind of interesting. But often the general consensus on what I see is that kind of the traditional belief is that those younger bucks, they're kind of keeping their distance away from that mature buck, especially in pre-rut and rut, and they're very observatory towards him. They're wanting to sit back and just watch him and analyze him. And I've even felt like a handful of times, I documented it one time in a video, but I've seen it other times where I feel like groups in that late season time frame, groups of young bucks will actually seek out a mature buck that's bedded. Say they've been bedding down since 10 a.m. and it's 2 p.m. and everyone's about to start standing up potentially. Those younger bucks will like seek out the mature buck and find him and try to get him up off his feet. And then they'll just kind of trail around him and watch him. And some of them might get a little brave and get too close and lower their head at him a little bit for fun. And then he'll posture up and raise his head above theirs, and they'll kind of cower and tuck their tails and back around him. But no, I just, moral story, I think that younger bucks are very fascinated and super interested, and they're constantly wanting to learn from that mature buck and be as close to him as possible. Even in a breeding, in a breeding phase, a lot of times you get the bucks that everyone calls a satellite buck, where and this happens every single time, by the way, is where a mature buck, from what I've seen at least, a mature buck will be on that doe, and they'll be locked down and bedded wherever that might be. And there's almost always 2 to 4, sometimes 5 younger bucks that are all just kind of lingering around within 50 to 150 yards. And they're just kind of waiting back and watching. And I don't know if they're attempting, and this is one theory that's been kicked around by science, is that twins can be born off of 2 bucks breeding 1 doe. I've never recorded it. I've tried to see if that would be something that has taken place.
Yeah.
But I think that more often than not, they're just kind of sitting back. They realize they're not going to have that breeding opportunity, and they're just sitting back and kind of being more observatory and like trying to learn what the heck we're supposed to be doing in this setting, which is kind of fascinating.
What about like from the mature buck's perspective, the one that's at the top of the hierarchy? What have you seen how he will use the other bucks in the bachelor group? Does he use them to his advantage sometimes, and how?
I think people have theorized this, and a lot of people have just had the idea off of it. And I don't know if it's intentional that he's actually using them as bait from time to time, but it seems like that they definitely will just kind of allow the other deer. Like so, the 10 was the best example recently of this, where I followed him, and he ended up grouping up with a group of inferior bucks. I would have classified them as, one of them may have been his age, maybe older out of that group. The deer that kind of had a banana antler on one side, but the other deer, they were all 2 years old or lesser, and there was probably 5 or 6 of them in total. And some days he would get up with them and he would move with them, and they would all walk out in the field together. But a lot of the times he would move away from them whenever everybody was about to stand up, 2 to 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. He would just get up and he would move away from them and walk a couple hundred yards away, and then he would bed back down, and he'd just bed out and wait. And then the younger bucks would stand up. They wouldn't even bat an eye. They wouldn't walk over towards him in that setting, and they'd just walk out in the field and start browsing that they were going to move out into and browse that evening. And then right as dark settled in, he would stand up and he'd move around and he'd walk right in on their trail where they walked in from. And
so he's like, using them as like security cover, kind of.
Yeah, no, kind of using them to go out and field whether or not there was a predator in that area or not, or maybe he just didn't want to get up and browse that particular day, and he just went and bedded down. He was kind of sick of hanging out with them. I don't know if that's exactly what he was doing, but I'd like to think that's what he's doing, is that he's strategically allowing them to move out into the open and into these more kind of dangerous situations. And then he waits for a little bit more darkness to settle in, and then he decides, now I can move out. Feels comfortable.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And so before I forget, you said that thermals were something that you feel like has been oversimplified in the hunting industry. And so what is something that's been undersimplified in your opinion?
Yeah. Definitely the influence of, there's a lot, but definitely the influence of terrain introduction as to how much of a variance takes place with thermals across a platform. And a lot of this is what we talked about. It has been that kind of introduction of hill country where you have north facing slopes, south facing slopes, east, west. And how much of a variance in thermals and the swirling effect that can potentially take place, and the pooling effects that can take place in those areas with hill country, how much of that's actually happening. And it's very consistent. And one of the things that you can start to do to kind of alleviate that and play to your advantage is paying attention to your stand locations depending upon what facing slope. And that's why I had said that's kind of the more advanced thinking, and it's the correct direction to take that advanced thinking, is that paying attention to where that sun is hitting on which facing slope. If you have the sun hitting on an east facing slope and you're wanting to hunt that spot, uh, get up high in a tree and it might blow your thermals out. But if the sun's not actively hitting that east facing slope and you're sitting in that spot and you're expecting your thermals to be able to blow out, then you might be screwed in that setting. And you need to kind of play that advantage and try to find the sunlight. And there's some situations where you could be on a north facing slope and it would be in the middle of the day. And if you sit up high enough on that north facing slope and you have enough clarity from you to the sun, you can hike up in your saddle 25 foot up in a tree, get to where your body is in the sunlight, even in the middle of the day. And then your thermals will still be able to continue to blow out of that area and that canopy. And constantly thinking about that. And if you're wanting your thermals to rise, trying to get your body into wherever that sunlight is actively hitting the floor, the forest floor. And if you're wanting your thermals to fall, you're going to try to need to be in an area where there's not sun hitting the forest floor, so there's not thermals rising, and you're going to be able to get those thermals to fall, or maybe just kind of pull below you and not really swirl.
At what point do you think that wind overrides thermals? How strong does the wind have to be?
Yeah, the theory is that over 10 miles per hour, anything over 8 to 10 miles per hour, then wind can start to become the leading factor. The problem with that theory is that probably whenever you get back into terrain features, as I do, say you have a 10 mile per hour wind day, it's estimated 10 miles per hour, and you go and you stand, it's a northwest wind, and you stand on the northwest side of that ridge, you're probably going to feel all of that 10 mile per hour of that wind. You're going to feel most of it. It's all there. And it's kind of hitting you. But if you go on the southeast facing side of that slope, and you're probably not going to feel all of that 10 miles per hour wind because the wind is coming from the northwest. So
Yeah.
It's kind of basic as that kind of thinking, is the fact that not all areas are going to be getting hit by that 10 mile per hour wind at the same frequency. And there will be locations, even on a higher mile per hour wind day, where thermals are going to still play the role of king. And there might be areas like if you're hunting the tops of ridges, then in those settings, yeah, wind might start influencing a significant amount more. But I think even if you have that 15 mile per hour wind and you're hunting at the top of a ridge, I think that the deer are utilizing, because they're not walking on tops of the ridge all the time. They're kind of off the top third or the bottom third. They're going to be utilizing thermals more often than not, even then. That's my theory. It's not like a set in stone answer.
Well, a lot of it, I mean, you're doing research, man, so you're going to have hypotheses and theories, and that's, I imagine, what's so compelling and just keeps you so interested in it is like you want to answer these questions, and eventually, if you do it long enough, you will.
Yeah.
It's just how long are you willing to continue researching instead of hunting? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you must have thought about that a little bit.
Well, you can get out and do small game hunting, and you can scratch the itch by fishing and things like that for sure. And I think that ultimately, and this is one thing that needs brought up, is I've had some people leave comments, and I'll keep mentioning that people leave comments on stuff that what did they say? That I was going to ruin hunting because I was going to expel everything that whitetail deer are doing. So I was single-handedly about to run hunting for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was like, well, that's an interesting take, because the problem with that, and the problem with even all of my research that I can introduce, unless I'm able to research every form of habitat and terrain and your exact settings and your exact hunting pressure and all of these variables, like we already talked about it, but there's so many stinking variables per situation. It's an individual basis. I can hunt my property and I could go the next property over and it's going to be completely different in the exact same form of habitat, the exact same terrain type. And you could even have similar hunting pressure types in those two locations, and they're going to hunt completely different. So that's kind of what's being brought to light with a lot of what I'm doing, is look at all the variables that are at play, and you are going to have to individually figure out your particular situation, your property, wherever you're hunting, the public land you're on. You're going to have to hone it down. You're going to have to figure out all of these variables for yourself. I might be able to lead you in the direction and kind of like, hey, this might be something you should look at, but I'm not going to ruin anything for anybody, because you still have to get out and do a tremendous amount of work if you want to kill a mature buck in the wild. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
100%, man. We'll never know everything about whitetail deer, no matter
Right.
how many Derrick Dixons pop up across it. We'll just never know. But on that note, like with all the variables and even moving property one property over, things might be different. Is there like one state or one area of the country that you would be super interested in going and bringing your research to? Like, is there a particular place?
Yeah, marshes and swamps.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. That's a big thing. And me and Danny Infalt had talked about this a decent amount, but one thing that he's observed is that he can, in these areas he's hunted for his entire life, but he can walk up to a marsh and he can tell you where the deer will be bedded on that particular moment in time, and they will be there. It's just kind of, he feels like they'll be there. At least he's addressed that maybe I need to fly up the drone and verify that he's as accurate as he thinks he is, but I would imagine that he is. And this is a style of marsh that's completely flat, no terrain in it. It is just 100% just freaking. There might be a foot of elevation change across the whole thing, but they always bed in these one particular locations. And trying to figure out why, that's something that I'm really fascinated by, is why are these deer deciding to bed in these particular locations in marsh settings, and just how deer move through marsh settings in maybe coastal areas as well. That's something that I'm really fascinated by.
Yeah, Dan's taken me out to that marsh before, and it's just, I think it's the very minute elevation change that seems to be why they're choosing to bed there. It's just drier. There might be a hump that's a foot above. Like most of the marsh is, you got water up over your knees, some to your hips, walking in there, but then you get a tiny elevation change where it's dry. And it seems like, that's where they end up bedding. But that would be an interesting study for sure. All right, a couple more questions and then we'll end it. Thanks for all this time. I want to be respectful of your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
What worries you about the future of hunting technology, if anything?
Yeah, there's this one design idea that some companies have been working on, and I'm pretty cautious with it in my mindset. And it's the idea of automating, basically taking all of this information, whether it's my research or guys with thermal drones or just universities, conservation departments, GPS color studied, and taking all of the information, compiling it into one area, and then predicting bedding locations and moving locations. Yes, deer AI is what I will call it.
Yeah,
I think it's a dangerous thing.
Yeah,
I think that it could be done in an educational way, where it's genuinely an educational tool. It is not a tool that you wake up on and you open your property in this application, and you now know where the deer are going to be bedding and where they're going to be moving. I think it could be done in a way that's educational, but the general consensus on the design for it, though, for a lot of people, is to make it to where it'll actually better you as a hunter, to where you wake up and you can see where these deer are bedding. You can see where these deer are moving, and you will use this information from an application that predicts deer movement, deer AI, and better yourself as a hunter off of it. And you will be able to know exactly where they're going to be bedding and where they're going to be moving. And I think that's a lot more destructive than a thermal drone is, for sure.
Yeah. And it just takes the fun away from it, man. Too much will make it not fun anymore.
Well, I think ultimately that design, there's like we've talked about a million times, there's so many variables, and the attempt to introduce something like that would predict with certainty where these deer are going to be bedding and where they're going to be moving, I think is going to add a tremendous amount of confusion, just like trail cameras have added for people, where they're uneducated to the level that they don't actually understand their property as well as they should. They haven't done the boots on the ground effort. They haven't mapped out their terrain the way that they should have. And new hunters begin coming into the space and relying on something like that, because that's kind of a cultural norm at that point, if it was to become, and it just kind of destroys the experience, and it makes it to where that hunter themselves can potentially become confused, because I think more often than not, that style, like let's just suggest you were a new hunter and you came in with this deer AI, and that's all the information plus a little bit of YouTube that you watched was being introduced into your hunting strategy, then I think there would be a lot of failure involved with that. I don't think it's going to be that successful, and it's going to add confusion. It's going to cause people to not enjoy the hunt as much that are being newly introduced to it. And I think that people that are being newly introduced to it need to be introduced in a way that boots on the ground is number one. You need to get out in nature to study what's actually taking place. You need to analyze it on a map from that perspective and make those connections yourself versus trying to allow deer AI to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. What's one thing that you're super excited about for the future of your research? Like one topic that you can't wait to study?
Can't wait to study. Yeah. Probably one that I'm on. I've done a little of it now. I've done a decent amount, but I would like to do more because I think there's a lot to be untapped, or tapped from that is agriculture. I could go down the rabbit holes of the ideas of researching things related to EHD and things like that, but I am pretty fascinated with agriculture because just on the initial forefront of it, and I talked about this to you before the podcast, like with researching turkeys, trying to make the prediction off of what's important to research on that turkey in itself, and every movement that the turkey made while I was researching a turkey, it seemed pretty predictable. Like I saw it take place, and it was like, yeah, that's what you should have done. Like I mentioned with a mature buck in this area, whenever they're bedding and I try to predict when they're moving, I'm almost always wrong. That's not the case with a turkey. I almost always know, I feel like, whenever I'm watching that turkey, what that turkey's about to do. And then same thing likewise with agriculture. For the most part, you can kind of hammer out what those deer are going to do. And I feel like there's something untapped there. There's more to look at in that retrospect. And I would like to dive down that trail more. But there's a lot of ways I could take that question. Pretty much everything. Yeah, I want to continue to research everything as it pertains to mature bucks, and definitely getting into even more steep terrain. I've researched hill country and has decent elevation changes, but I haven't researched like out in Pennsylvania and places like that where it genuinely gets a lot steeper. Ohio, I want to go to some of those areas where it's a lot steeper, the terrain is, and much deeper changes, and see how those deer react. Because I've had some people say, like my comment earlier about deer aren't mountain goats, things like that. I've had some people say, well, actually, come out to my area. They climb stuff. They're like ridiculously steep all the time. And it's like, well, I want to see that. If that's something that takes place, then I want to observe it and see why they're doing that. What's making them make that elevation change and hike up a trail versus trying to take the path of least resistance. So it's something that I'm interested in too. There's a lot though. Yeah.
All right, and then so here's the final question for you.
Ooh.
If you had the opportunity to follow one famous buck, in the history of hunting, a famous buck, and see what he did, throughout his life and how the kill went down, what buck would that be?
There's a lot of conspiracy theory bucks that I'd be interested in seeing.
The Rompola buck?
Well, there'd be, that's one. There'd be a handful of ones that have been potentially killed on high fences that I would like to see. My answer for that will probably be one that wasn't killed by a human, and it would be the non-typical buck that was found dead in St. Louis, the record one, 300 and whatever inches it was. I want to know where that deer came from. I want to know its origin story, and I want to know why it was randomly found dead obscurely in St. Louis, Missouri, because I have a theory, and I could dive down it just a little bit, but there was this massive push for the introduction of superbucks in like the 1970s and the 1980s by universities. You can find it in old books. Penn State, down in Texas, really big, is where most of it was taking place, but there were other universities.
And releasing these genetically, built deer out into the wild or something?
That's potentially my thought. Yes, I think that there's a chance, and that is a deep, dark thought. And, we'll probably never know. There was such a hard push for it, though. Everyone wanted to find a way to create a superbuck. How do we make these superbucks? And then all of a sudden, at that time in the 70s, they were only at like 160 inch, 170 inch deer. They couldn't make it happen. And they wanted to build the biggest super bucks possible. And obviously Texas has become pretty successful in making big bucks. But all of a sudden that university talk and all of this push for a super buck quit, and no one was talking about it as much. And high fence farms were kind of popularized at that point, and no one was talking about it at the university level. Conservations no longer had their hands involved with super bucks. But it kind of makes a guy wonder if, for fanfare and potential investment of more tag sales, big bucks started popping up around the area magically and dying. So that way a state might be looked at as more of a big buck state than another state across the pond. It's just a theory, but that is an idea that I've gone down. So I would love to track that deer, that one in St. Louis. I think he died in the 80s. I could be wrong about that, but I'm really fascinated his origin story. Yeah,
that's a good one. I think I personally would definitely I'd want to see that Rumpala buck.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that would be a really cool one as well. But,
see what happened.
Yeah, just to know.
Yeah.
All
right. Well, great. Thanks for coming on. There he is, folks. Derrick Dixon, the guy who used to tag bucks and now he just tags them in spreadsheets.
Correct.
There he goes. There he goes, Derrick Dixon. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, man.
The guy who used to want to hunt, shoot mature bucks, and now he just wants a buck to open up emotionally for him.
Let me into his bed every once in a while. Yeah.
That's right. Well, thanks for coming on, Derrick. Guys, make sure you come see him at Huntstock Midwest, July 17th through the 19th, Dodge County Fairgrounds in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Again, get your tickets at huntstockevents.com. Use code DD10 for Derrick Dixon, DD10 for 10% off. And we hope to see you guys out there. And looking forward to more of your research, man. It's super, super compelling stuff. I think what you're doing is amazing.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yep. Thank you, man. See ya.
See ya.
The Woodstock for Hunters Huntstock is coming to Wisconsin to the Dodge County Fairgrounds in Beaver Dam, July 17th through the 19th. Huntstock is bringing energy, excitement, and attendee experience back to sportsman shows. Legendary seminar lineups and meet and greets from the hunting public. Lanny Benoit, Dan Infalt, Barry Wensel, John Eberhart, Billy Moles, Jared Scheffler, and Dan Small. $40,000 in giveaways, including bows, guns, optics, hunting trips, stands, saddles, and more. You won't find window salesmen here, just hunting exhibitors like Vortex, Sig Sauer, and Tacticam, to name a few. Bring your bows for the 3D archery range and novelty shoots, and unwind with live music and after parties, and campsites available right there. Plan ahead and get your tickets online at huntstockevents.com. Huntstock feels less like a trade show, more like a deer camp.